Chapter 13. The Mirror of Erest. Chapter text. Lily nodded as she took the book, checked her spot, then closed it and eyed her son briefly before saying, "I'm keeping my promise, son. You wanted to know about Snape." She sucked in a huge breath and said, "So here it goes." She was the only one who spoke for almost a solid half-hour. The three boys didn't trust themselves to speak on the matter without cursing something in the process. When she was finally done, ending with the last bit of information they knew about Snape's current whereabouts, or thought they knew since they were rumors, she looked pleading at her son, begging him to understand what these other three just couldn't. There was too much bad blood between the lot, but Harry didn't have to inherit his father's grudge, simply based on this book's facts about him. When she was done, Harry nodded slowly to himself, rubbing his temple again. Everything his mother had just told him came as a surprise, but he also got that feeling again, the one he had when they had told him Remus' story. He felt right again, whole, like another part of his life was explained. Then he met his mother's eyes and said to the room at large, "All right, I'm not going to say anything then. I'll wait until these books are over before making a final judgment call." Lily beamed and threw her arms around her son, thanking Merlin she had such an understanding boy. Then when she leaned back from the hug, she stood up, marched over to James in the chair, and practically dragged him into the kitchen. Once in there and hopefully out of earshot of the others, she said, "I'm sorry." James blinked. He hadn't been expecting that. Before he could say anything, though, she kept going. "It's just that. I have to believe Save wouldn't do this. You know, counter curses are done in the same manner," and her voice caught on a catch in her throat. Taking this moment, James cut in with, "Lily, I'm not mad at you for defending him. Lord knows if I was, I'd never not be mad at you." She made a face at him, but he pressed on. "I was just hurt when you made it seem like you were going to stand there and do nothing when it said he was going to kill our son." Lily shook her head hard from side to side, her hair whipping into her face as she spluttered, "No, I would never." Then, when she saw the look in those hazel eyes, he still looked beyond hurt, and unbelieving she rushed on. "I was just trying to get you to see that. You've been wrong about him before. At least try to do what Harry is. Give him these 7 years at school to prove that he's not the man you think he is." James' face scrunched up. He would never like Snape. How could he, when James still had a lurking fear that one of these days he was going to come and try to take Lily away from him, for good this time? He had never shared this fear with anyone, but it still lurked in the back of his mind every night like a growing fungus. He thought his friends would tell him he was ridiculous, and Lily would probably slap him for suggesting she couldn't handle herself and take care of her own life. Still, to appease an obviously upset love of his life, he did promise her this. They made their way back into the living room to find a rousing debate between these three boys. Sirius and Remus were trying to convince Harry that it was a great idea for him to go and pull a prank or two at school, despite the fact that Harry was out of school and could do no such thing, or already had with no influence from them. Harry was laughing along and trying to explain that he really thought this was a bad idea, but without any real force in it. He seemed to be enjoying just sitting and talking to them at all. When the two parents re-entered the room, Harry went quiet and looked at the two as if fearing they would start arguing again, while Remus and Sirius took one look at them and began gagging at once. "Please," Sirius choked, clutching at his throat. "Please at least leave the room if you two are going to start making out again." "We're begging. Save poor Harry's eyes from such a sight," Remus agreed in disgust. Harry was laughing again at once, while the married couple took their spots on either side of him. James and his two friends began bickering at once, the two of them arguing that this was how they made up all the time in 7th year, while Lily looked about for her place. Once she found it, she began reading about Christmas approaching and immediately frowned with concern. Fragile as she felt right now, she might just burst into tears all over again if Harry went back to the Dursleys' house and was ignored or stayed at an empty castle for the holidays. The other three looked just as concerned about this, so Harry was quick to say, "I have a great feeling about this Christmas." At their astounded looks he said, "Really? I think I get a wonderful gift, several actually." When they all beamed at him with pure joy, Harry decided to decline mentioning that there was something else that happened on Christmas that had been bothering him since he'd laid eyes on his parents. This was not the first time he'd seen their faces, of that he was sure, but like the book had said, the Dursleys had no pictures of them. Then why was he so sure on this day that he might just get his 11-year-old wish? Brushing it off, he let his mother go on without a fuss. An old favourite gag of Peter's, having snowballs follow those around. James laughed. Poor dears, Lily muttered for the health of those owls. Yeesh, at least Slughorn put warming charms in there, Sirius grumbled, shivering a bit himself at the sound of Harry's potions class with that cold-hearted monster. Malfoy really shouldn't talk about himself like that, Remus snapped, anger bubbling up in him again at once for his malicious, but true implications of Harry actually not being the one wanted at home. Harry wouldn't let himself feel dejected at Malfoy's snip, instead beamed over at a man he really was starting to think of as his uncle. Not that he had anything real to compare the feeling to, but it felt right all the same. Seems Malfoy's been even more of a pleasure once he's been humbled, Sirius grumbled in disgust, not wanting to imagine that kid being worse to his pup after his team lost a match. I'm sure ludicrous frog jokes weren't any funnier to his group than it is to us, Lily said, rolling her eyes at these childish antics. James grit his teeth so much that it was starting to hurt. He was really beginning to hate this Malfoy brat almost as much as he hated Snivellus, who would always take jabs at all four of them, he and Sirius for being rather spoiled and rich, and Remus for his lack thereof. Still, he kept himself quiet. For now, no sense in fighting with the book at least. Harry was just wondering why Malfoy had made that leap. It was true, but as Harry had never even really spoken to anyone outside of his two friends, Malfoy had made quite the pompous jump that Harry wasn't spending his first Christmas back with anyone made him unwanted at home. He wasn't wrong, but the oddness was there all the same. Can't decide if you staying is a relief we won't have to hear about them, or depressing he's going to be in an empty castle, Sirius sighed. He and Remus had always stayed at school together, while James and Peter had nearly always gone home during the holidays. Go with the first one, Remus sighed, running his hand through his hair sadly. Oh, Ron's staying. That's wonderful, Lily beamed, while all of the boys perked up at once as well. This really is going to be fun then, Remus and Sirius both said, remembering back to all the times they'd had in an almost deserted castle with tons of victims that weren't expecting a holiday prank. Nobody bothered to ask why Charlie's siblings hadn't come along. They were sure the parents just wanted to spend some time with just one of their children on a holiday. That boy has no boundaries, Lily said in disgust, while all four boys looked like they dearly wanted to punch Malfoy in his face for making a crack about Hagrid like that. Gah, can you say timing? Sirius snarled. Really, he hoped Ron had a chance to shove it to that kid soon without Snape coming around. Thank you, Hagrid, Remus said to the ceiling in relief. If he had to deal with another instance that Harry got in trouble because no one was there for his side, he might have lost his temper again. I meant what I said before, James said. Hagrid is my favorite person in Harry's life right now. He certainly seems to be keeping an eye on him, Lily agreed fondly. Sirius was still disgruntled. Ron hadn't had the chance to punch Malfoy. Bloody Christmas to you two, James hissed in disgust for his son still being the one punished. And I can't wait to hear all about when Ron does get just that, Sirius said brightly. I don't blame you one bit, Harry, Remus agreed. Both Malfoy and Snape deserved some kind of comeuppance. The castle always did seem even more magical when they decorated it, Lily said fondly. Nah, James said. We always tried to get as much homework as we could done, so we could enjoy the actual break. I'm rather impressed, Lily admitted. Sure, we needed all the time we could get to plan out some of our ideas, Sirius agreed. Lily then chose to roll her eyes at the ceiling. Oh, all four of them said, when the real explanation came up of all Harry's time in the library was being spent on looking for Flame. Yeah, Harry said sheepishly. I didn't have Dad to tell me who he was, so we had no idea what we were doing. James' momentary pride and thrill at hearing his son refer to him like that for the first time in his life didn't quite cover the fact that all four adults grimaced at the comment, so to change the subject, Harry asked, You said he was an alchemist. What's that? What do they do? James gave himself a little shake before answering, I think mainly their goal is to turn metal into gold. It's a really shrouded branch of magic, which is why Flamel's card is so bloody rare. Had to nearly pay my weight in gold for the thing. His card didn't say much about it, just talked about his interests and his wife. Harry nodded along and then asked, "So, you don't know what Flamel has to do with this then?" "No," he admitted, shaking his head. He hadn't had much time to think on it, really. But now that all he could come up with was, "I know a lot of papers mentioned he and Dumbledore were working on something together, but I've no idea what." This was years ago, too. I don't even think my parents were born, but really I've no idea. Harry nodded in disappointment, as did the others. None of them had even heard of Flamel, so they had no idea what was going on. "Oh, I'm so sure," Remus snickered. "No person in their right mind would believe those kids were just curious about all this." "Oh, Harry," James said, laughing a bit at Harry's mind, convinced he'd read the name somewhere, and he was right. "Now you see the importance of reading your chocolate frog cards." Harry nodded, hoping his younger self would remember this as well soon. He already had a slight headache from remembering all the books they had sorted through. Lily couldn't help but smile indulgently at the kids not giving up at Hagrid's warning. She knew better than to berate about their curiosity. She would have to admit even she would have done exactly what they were doing now. The details of the kids' search was a bit depressing, though. "There's a new saying," Sirius laughed, "looking for a wizard in the library." "I can't even imagine that," Remus said in disbelief, stumbling through books and hoping to come across his name. "We didn't have a better idea," Harry defended. "You could look until your 7th year and still not get through half of them," James said. Harry balked at him had they done this. "Maybe, but I really think I find out about him over Christmas." Yet he wasn't so sure. Perhaps he was wrong, and they really never did find out the mystery of the tiny package. Lily simply decided to keep going. Harry was now looking quite discouraged, and she really was feeling bad for him. Remus laughed at Ron's method in particular, saying, "Good a system as any, I suppose." All 4 adults were now frowning, hoping dearly this object had nothing to do with the restriction section. If it did, it would only heighten their worry about what was being kept in a school full of children. James huffed at the interruption from the cranky librarian, muttering, "Pince never did like students. Why she works with them is beyond me. Can you believe an adult would actually yell at someone to get out of a library?" Sirius laughed. "That's as backwards as it gets." "I bet she'd know who Flamel was in a second," Lily sighed with agreement to Harry's problem. "Now you're just being paranoid, thinking Snape's going to know everyone you ask." Remus laughed. "I doubt Snape would even think to look in on you lot looking up some old name." "We were being cautious," Harry defended, feeling stupider by the minute. "Don't worry, love," Lily said, patting him on the cheek. "They're only messing with you. I'd be more worried if they didn't." Harry relaxed at once, smiling around at them all again. "So you plan on spending the whole of your break in there?" James asked in disgust. "Really, Harry, someone in that school needs to teach you how to live." "Oh, I doubt they will," Sirius replied for Harry. "Have you ever known any 11-year-old that can focus during the holidays?" "I seem to recall us getting some of our best work done then," Remus argued, glimmers of mischief appearing in his eyes. "Yeah, but that was something we actually wanted to do," Sirius finalized. She could still ask her parents, Muggles or not, Lily said, thinking it over. Muggles do actually know some famous wizards, like Merlin, for example. "Still, if we haven't heard of him, I doubt a couple of Muggles would have," James said with a shrug. Lily couldn't argue with that, and it was derailed anyways by the boys beginning their vacation and Flamel leaving their mind altogether. "Saw that coming," Sirius chuckled. "Brings back all the good memories," Remus chuckled. "You stayed behind during break?" Harry asked curiously. "Oh yeah," Sirius nodded along with his friend. "Moony and I always stayed behind." Harry bit his lip, wanting to ask why, but feeling it was a bit rude. But then Remus answered for him anyways. "My parents loved me dearly, but it was very hard for them to take care of me during the holidays. The school was much better equipped, so I chose to stay there." "I hated my house," Sirius said in bright tones, "so I always kept around to keep him company." "I went home most years," James added on without being asked. "My parents pinned for me if I was gone too long." "You would think they'd be glad to be rid of your big head," Lily muttered. James kept going, pretending he hadn't heard that, and Peter always went home as well. His mother doted on him like no other. "Poor thing, she's been sick for a month now," Remus said sadly, "which is why we haven't blamed him for not being around too much." Harry nodded along sadly, and then let his mother continue reading when she realized how depressed the other boys were getting. "I've never been any good at chess," Sirius rolled his eyes. You were always too impatient to learn, Remus chuckled. See, it's not just me, Sirius cried as Harry seemed to be drawing his luck for the game. You can't blame it all on the pieces, James laughed. Just admit you never could remember which way the pieces went. Sirius huffed and crossed his arms, mumbling something about ganging up on him. Lily pursed her lips at the idea of her son really not getting a single present in his life all over again, but quickly read on, keeping Harry's words in mind about how good a feeling he had for this particular one. Not one of them could think of a thing to say to Ron's sarcasm about vegetable for gifts. They were all too pleased that Harry had a proper Christmas at all to mark Ron's comment. You have a musical talent we don't know about. Remus chuckled in surprise at Hagrid's flute for Harry. Doubt it, Harry laughed himself, feeling warm all over at these feelings. Maybe you could use it to call your bird to you. Sirius chuckled at the description the instrument's noise made. Friendly, Harry said, thinking privately a 50-pence piece was the nicest thing the Dursleys had probably ever given him. All four adults gritted their teeth in frustration, but Harry was clearly in too good a mood, and they refused to let their moods be sunk as well. I'm guessing Ron's never seen Muggle money then. Lily smiled at the boy's fascination. It's official, Lily beamed, feeling close to tears at the way the Weasleys had taken Harry in, the gifts he'd been given from this mother. We are taking Harry over to the Weasleys as soon as we're done here. Might be a bit hard, Remus said, trying not to laugh. We've never been formally introduced. You just want to show up on the doorstep. I'll think of something, Lily said with confidence, and James chuckled to himself, not begrudging her this at all. In fact, they were all thinking to themselves that they really needed to come up with a way to thank both Hagrid and the Weasley family. Best kind of gifts you can get, Sirius chuckled for Hermione's sweet treats. Lily was having so much fun hearing of all Harry's gifts, she almost breezed right past the mention of something silvery grey, like a cloak being the next. No way, all three boys breathed. It was impossible that was locked up in the house right now. Puzzled, Lily gave them an odd look, but she couldn't deny she was thinking the same thing. Harry groaned slightly, pressing his fist to his head in pain, but quickly shook it off at their concerned looks, saying, I think I know what that is. I don't, pursing his lips, Lily decided to quickly read on before Harry pressured himself too much. It can't be mine, James said, praying that he was wrong, that his son really had been able to inherit his birthright. My cloak is here in this house. How many invisibility cloaks can there really be, though? Sirius breathed, leaning forward eagerly. Perhaps Hagrid found it when he took Harry, Remus offered. It's possible, Lily murmured. We might have tried to hide Harry under it, but of course he would have been crying. All four of them were getting exceptionally pale the longer they thought about this, but James still managed to say, yes, but then why wouldn't Hagrid have given it to him with the flute? They were all stumped, and Harry was fighting back the urge to be sick, the building tension in his head from knowing the answer, yet not being able to grasp it. Lily decided to read on, hoping they would get an answer. Quite a shocker at first, seeing yourself invisible, Sirius agreed, wanting to laugh as he thought back on all the times he'd snuck up on people in that. A note was in there, explaining everything to him, I hope, James muttered, shifting his weight around in agitation. I did what? James balked. I haven't lent my cloak to anyone since I left school. Why would it be in anyone's possession at a time like this? No one even knows it exists except for the people here, Sirius spluttered. And Peter, Remus added on quietly. Everyone got very quiet as they all thought of something at once. Peter hadn't been hanging around them much lately. Peter had asked to borrow James' cloak for a few missions for the Order. What if James sucked in a deep breath and said, what if Peter's still alive? He could have borrowed my cloak, but there are a million reasons why he wouldn't be here or even heard about us dying for ages. The others all exchanged looks, then Remus asked, but then why wouldn't he have come looking for Harry? James swallowed thickly, but he had no answer for that. None of them did. Lily reached around Harry to give James' shoulder a soft squeeze, saying, I guess we won't know until we find out, yeah. Nodding numbly, he didn't protest as Lily kept going. All three boys had a mix of feelings they were sorting through. Honestly, it may not have been Peter, but even Remus or Sirius in the same circumstance. But it still didn't answer the question of where they would have been for the past 11 years of Harry's life. There were no answers to be had, so Lily slowly kept going for all the good it would do. We'd all like to know who sent it, Sirius grumbled his agreement to Harry's questions. Oh, I've no doubt that was once mine. James murmured his confirmation to Harry, who'd already had the sense himself he was right about that one. Can't blame you on not wanting anyone else to know about it, Remus agreed. James didn't show me that thing for almost 6 months. They switched those sweaters, James said at once upon the twins' arrival. Unless they didn't, because they knew one would assume they would switch those, Sirius laughed. Unless they thought you would think they hadn't switched them, because they knew people would think they had, so they did switch them, Remus joined in, smiling at the inept sentence. Please, Lily begged, don't do this to me. We'll be here for an hour, and I doubt we ever really find out. Oh, fine, James huffed. Oh, I doubt Harry's sweater is really any better, Lily said at once in exasperation of those boys. I'm sure that maroon clashes with his hair marvelously, Sirius laughed. Gred and 4J. I'm sure that's exactly what your mum intended to name you, Remus cackled. It's Christmas, James frowned. Really, does this Percy ever have fun? He couldn't believe anyone could tell someone to pipe down on a holiday. Well, you should wear it anyways, Lily huffed. She thought it was a lovely and sweet idea and couldn't understand Percy protesting wearing it. I'm sure he loved every moment of being frog marched around by his brothers, Sirius laughed. And that dinner without the prefects even more, James agreed. You, Lily crinkled up her nose, picturing all those mice running over the food. I'm sure they made Mrs. Norris happy, though, Remus chuckled. Dumbledore in a bonnet, lovely mental image, James laughed. Lily's amusement of all this increased as well when the festivities included Hagrid indulging so much he leaned over and gave McGonagall a kiss on the cheek, who giggled in response. Ah, take it back, Sirius cried, pressing his fists to his eyes. All the teachers have clearly indulged too much, Lily chuckled. We always used to get great prank ideas from those wizard crackers. Remus laughed at Harry's shock of receiving a grow-your-own-warts kit. Poor Harry, Remus agreed. I can't stand when people try to backseat play me. And it doesn't even seem Percy was doing a good job of it. Lily nodded in agreement. Well, you can't blame that one on me, James and Sirius both said. Wow, why didn't we ever think of playing keep away with a prefect badge? James whistled. Because I would have killed you both, Remus said pleasantly. I really hope you figure out who sent you that cloak soon, James pleaded, eyeing his son for any trace of remembrance as this was brought up again. Harry was shaking his head sadly from side to side, as mystified as they were. You have more restraint than any of us, Sirius told him. I would have run around the castle first thing when I found it, not kept it in my room all day. Going anywhere in the castle with no one knowing is taking the idea a bit far, Remus said lightly. It makes you invisible, not impervious. I just hope Harry doesn't use it to sneak into classrooms and set up a trap so that when a certain student sat down, Lily began hotly. That was never proven, James declared, pointing wildly at her. Lily just rolled her eyes at all of them. James shrugged at Harry's decision not to wake Ron, saying, Nah, I used it at home by myself all the time. I took Sirius along with me our first night there. Which is how we got caught, Sirius chuckled. I'd never used the thing before, and we weren't used to sharing yet. You two still don't know how to share, Remus rolled his eyes. Really? All three boys demanded in disgust at Harry's choice of destination for this maiden voyage. The whole of Hogwarts, and you choose to go to the library, James demanded, looking faint. That's a waste of the cloak, Sirius agreed. Leave him be, Lily said before Remus could jump in. The library has been on his mind for weeks now. I don't blame him for that being his first thought. All three boys muttered a bit more, but Lily wouldn't hear it and just moved on. Well, the restricted section's not so bad, James said, picking himself back up slightly. At least he's doing something he couldn't do during normal school hours. Lily rolled her eyes. Honestly, why these boys wanted Harry to be a rule breaker was still beyond her, but she couldn't fault Harry for his curiosity driving him to this place. The books might honestly be aware you're there, Remus said curiously. I doubt Pince used more than a bit of rope to make sure no one snuck back there. Good point, Sirius said slowly. There really might be a spell on those books. Now very curious, Lily read on to find they were closer to right than they realized when a book began screaming upon Harry opening it. Oh my gosh, James gasped before laughing his ass off. Of all the rotten luck, Sirius cackled. It's not funny, Harry mumbled, rubbing his ears in remembrance. That thing gave me a heart attack. All three boys were still laughing at this spot of misfortune. Even Lily wanted to bite her lip to stop from laughing for a moment before she remembered. You know, this most likely summoned Madam Pince. That dried up all of their laughter pretty quickly, James noting, "Well, look at it this way. Can you really imagine Harry getting into much trouble for sneaking into the library?" "McGonagall might reward him again," Remus agreed, his voice still trembling slightly with laughter. "Really, I swear that man doesn't sleep," Sirius said in disbelief as Filch showed up near instantly to this. "What a first use," James chuckled as Harry escaped the caretaker with ease using the cloak. "I'll give you credit. We never thought of that," Remus agreed. "That's like the third time you've made the mistake of not paying attention to where you were going," Sirius said in disappointment. "Well, he's got to learn somehow," James said sadly, wishing that Harry would find another of his treasured objects. "There are suits of armor all over the castle," Lily said in confusion to Harry's not really much of an observation. "Yeah, but this one was posed a certain way," Harry tried to explain. "Okay, that makes sense," Remus agreed. "Where did you inherit all this bad karma from?" Remus demanded when Filch and Snape arrived on the scene so quickly. "I think it's retribution for you lot," Lily said primly. "That karma's getting back at Harry for all the stunts you pulled at school." "Don't say that, Lily," James said, clutching his chest in pain. "I'd never forgive myself for that." "I think it's just Harry's ignorance," Sirius said bracingly. "Things should get better the longer he's at school." "Well, I'm glad you figured out beforehand that cloak doesn't make you any less solid," James snickered. "I remember when Peter first got the cloak on his own, he ran straight into a wall. He still claims it was an accident and he tripped, but come on," Remus agreed. "See," Sirius said brightly, "he's learning already." They were all proud he'd managed to slip into a room without being caught. "Well, that is odd," James agreed, who stashed a mirror in a classroom. None of them had any idea, so Lily read on, expecting Harry to shrug it off and ghost out of there. They'd probably never get an answer, and with any luck Harry would go back to the common room without another incident. "Could you try saying that in English?" Remus said, going a bit cross-eyed at such an odd transcription in the mirror. Lily was frowning at the words, saying, "No, that's how it's spelled." "You think maybe it's a different language?" James asked, leaning around Harry to look. "None that I recognize," Remus said. They all passed the book around, taking a look at the odd inscription, but none of them had a clue what it could be, until Sirius said slowly, "Hang on, this first word is backwards." "What?" Remus asked, leaning over to see what he meant. "See here," he pointed out. "Erest is desire spelled backwards. That's the only word, though, dang it," he muttered, scanning through the rest of it. "Well, maybe," Remus said, taking the book from Sirius, then getting up and going into the kitchen. When he came back, he had a quill and fresh parchment, and he then scribbled down the sentence in the same manner. At first, they still couldn't make any sense of the words, but then Remus said slowly, "I think I've got it. The words aren't spaced right, but if you fix it like this, it reads, 'I show not your face, but your heart's desire.' Unless you can find another combination that works." James took the paper and looked at it, then at the original and then nodded, saying, "No, it makes sense." Lily and Harry had been sitting there, watching them all with fascination. Lily spoke up. "That was brilliant. I can't believe you three worked that out. What, did you think we got through school on our good looks alone?" Sirius quipped. Smiling around at them, Lily decided not to press the issue, and so she took the book back, rereading that line, and still shaking her head in disbelief, she kept reading. "What, why?" they all said in a panic at once, of why Harry would be holding back a scream. They really didn't want to deal with yet another deadly situation already. "Because I wasn't alone," Harry whispered, so quietly to himself none of the others even heard him. "Now what on earth?" James demanded, blinking in shock. "Room full of people. That couldn't be right." "That's impossible," Sirius said. "Nothing has ever been able to see through the cloak." "That's what you caught on," Remus stated, looking stunned. "How about the crowd of people in the room?" Lily was looking expectantly from Harry to the book, but Harry was clearly not listening to any of them. He was rubbing his temple furiously, whispering, "It's them. I knew I'd seen them." Pressing on loudly over the still bickering boys, she knew by now the best way to settle her son was to just complete the memory. "Possible," James said slowly to Harry, thinking he'd figured out the mirror's trick showing the people invisible or not. "But wouldn't you have bumped into one of them?" asked Sirius, clearly not buying it. "Don't touch it," Remus said at once, going pale as a sheet. "It could be some trick, and you fall through and get stuck in there." Now they were all looking very concerned, wanting to egg Harry out of that room, knowing it was pointless, so they instead comforted themselves with leaning in very close to their Harry. Lily stuttered a bit, glancing up at her son with shock etched into her face. There was very little other explanation for a woman in the mirror having the same eyes as Harry. "Oh," James whispered, looking from Harry to Lily, to the book and back again like one of them was going to scream, "Gotcha." "That was unexpected," Sirius murmured. "I stand by what I said," Remus gasped, coming out of his shock. It could still be a trick, personalizing it to a particular wizard. Lily looked like she was about to start crying herself, but her voice remained steady as she kept going about herself apparently. "I don't like this," Sirius moaned, his head dropping into hands as he shook it back and forth. He never wished to imagine James inside a mirror of all things. "I really don't like this." "My poor boy," James whispered, giving Harry a quick hug. This was, by all accounts, the first time Harry was laying eyes on his parents, and it was through a mirror. A possibly dangerous, dark object that could suck his soul out or something equally as awful. Both Sirius and Remus and Harry looked like they were going to burst into tears right along with Lily, but Harry was the saving grace as he said, "Remember, I'm here, and I know you guys now." I'm sorry you have to hear about this." "Don't," Lily interrupted, bucking up her own strength when she saw her son's face. "This is what we wanted. To hear about your life, the good and the bad. This just happens to be an awful mix of both," Remus muttered. All four of them shivered in disgust at their worry finally being put to the test. They still didn't want Harry touching that thing. Then they all shivered again, as they realized this was probably the first time in his life he had been able to utter those two simple words, what every child called their parents. Sucking in a deep breath, Lily forced herself to go on. Both James and Lily fought back fresh waves of pain when they realized that this was most likely their parents in the mirror as well, others that Harry obviously had never seen. Lily's breath hitched slightly as she read that now Harry wanted to fall into this image, this being her worst fear since this had started, and she didn't give the others a chance to panic as she blasted on. "Oh, thank Merlin," they all breathed in relief when nothing of the sort happened. "Okay," Remus reassessed. "You're clearly drawn to it, but any person in your situation would be." He trailed off, still trying to figure out the magical property of this object. "I show not your face, but your heart's desire," Sirius repeated. "So that's all it will do," James said slowly. "It will just show you what you want most in the world." "I still don't want you going back," Lily said quietly. "I'm afraid you'll waste away your life staring at that." "Can't do anything about it now," Sirius muttered. Lily decided to agree with him, so pushing back the rest of her rising emotions, she kept reading right up to Harry telling Ron about this, and their subsequent conversation about Harry wanting to see Ron's family in the mirror next. "I don't think it will work like that," Remus said at once, shaking his head. "Well, we didn't know that then," Harry said, shrugging, trying to remember what Ron did see, and as always, coming up blank. Sirius made an awful noise, somewhere between a snort of mirth and a scathing rebuke to Ron's comment about the mirror only showing dead people. James interpreted that noise pretty well and said for the others, that was the most tactless thing he could have possibly said, and yet Sirius may have said the same thing. "It did pop into my mind," he admitted. All four adults exchanged uneasy looks when the passing mention of Harry not eating was spoken, Remus saying, "May have spoken too soon. What if this thing has a compulsion about it, and you'll eventually just waste your life away in front of it?" "I know I don't do that," Harry said at once. He felt he wouldn't have the same feelings about that mirror if he had. Right now, he mostly just felt a sense of loss. He'd have liked to keep that mirror back in his life, so that he could see his parents whenever he wanted, but he was also thinking there was something else. Something important about this mirror, but it didn't involve him, or Ron nodding and feeling reassured, Lily kept going. "That reminds me," James said as Harry had a task of just finding it again. "What on earth is that mirror doing there? Could a teacher have left it there, and they're going to use it in their next class?" Remus offered. Quirrell, for example, could be teaching his 7th years about dangerous objects. "Well, since we've still no idea," Sirius rolled his eyes, "how about we just see if Harry can find it again first?" None of them could really decide how they felt about them actually finding it again. They were happy beyond belief that Harry really did know what his parents looked like, before now anyways, but they still feared what this mirror's true power was. Nothing for it now, though. Well, at least it's accurate. James beamed down at his son as well, trying to play that off as a joke. That sort of makes sense, Remus agreed, nodding along. It will only show the person standing directly in front of it. Now, let's see what Ron sees, Sirius said a bit eagerly. That's his heart's desire, James snorted. He's hardly shown any ambition, the opposite in fact of his attitude towards his perfect brother is to go by. Let me keep going, Lily scolded. She had a bit of an idea where this was going. All eyes cleared from confusion when Lily did give the whole picture. Oh, Sirius said sadly. Yeah, I can see why Ron would want to be the best of all his siblings, Remus agreed with a small frown. James let out a low, throaty whistle, saying, Damn, though, I was head boy and Quidditch captain, and the responsibility of all that nearly made me go bald. It made you easier to be around, though, Lily chuckled. Moving on, Sirius said quickly, not wanting the couple to start making googly eyes at each other. Lily made at him before doing so anyways, Ron's question of this showing the future hitching in her throat at once. We can only hope, James said sadly. Comparing what Harry and Ron see in there, yeah, I've got to give you a do, Harry, Sirius chuckled. You deserve to look longer. Leave Ron be, Remus defended. I'm sure anyone would want to stand around and look at that thing forever if they had the chance. None of them mentioned what they were thinking now. What would they see? Lily nibbled on her lip in contemplation, but wouldn't let the thought linger as she kept going only for it to be ruined by Mrs. Norris showing up. Her mind went to exactly what Harry's had at the time. Was her son about to be caught? Did the cloak work on cats? Yep, all three said at once, while James elaborated. But they can still smell you and hear you. You've got to be very careful around her, 'cause if you don't fool her, she'll still run off for Filch. Or just bark at her, Sirius snickered. Thankfully, it seemed to work. Good, all four of them said. They really didn't want Harry getting caught again. Even Lily couldn't deny her son this reason for being out of bed. Well, that's surprising, Lily said. She hadn't been expecting Ron to deter Harry from doing this. Didn't he realize how important this was? I'm surprised Ron isn't demanding he can go with you. Yes, well, Ron can simply conjure up that image in his head whenever he wants, James pointed out, whereas Harry wants to be able to memorize his a bit more. Because he's being cautious. Remus rolled his eyes. He couldn't blame Ron for sounding like Hermione at a time like this. Even Ron insisting he was serious made no impact on Harry, though it did Lily as she tried to ignore what she just said. Sirius opened his mouth like he was going to say something, but Remus quickly picked up a pillow and smothered him before he had the chance. Lucky, Sirius said, finally shoving Remus off of him to praise Harry getting back through the castle. Who on earth is there at a time like this? James yelped in shock. I've no idea, Sirius and Remus both said. It couldn't be a teacher, Lily muttered. He said again, so whoever knows he's been there before. Harry cleared his throat a bit and then pointed at the book, smiling slightly. All four jumped guiltily, then James eyed Harry a bit. He had a look on his face like he might actually remember what was coming this time. He didn't, but he had a good feeling about this meeting, which is why he was so unconcerned. Dumbledore, they all said in shock. I didn't even know he left his office, Sirius said in surprise. Don't be daft, James rolled his eyes. He's got to use the loo at some point. Really, you too? Remus shook his head in disbelief at them, while Lily ignored them completely. Well, you don't seem to be getting in trouble, Sirius said brightly. Remember that time he caught us rigging up one of the statues, and he actually believed Peter when he said we were just admiring it, James laughed. I thought he had lost his marbles, Remus agreed. So you lot are saying Dumbledore, the headmaster of this school, lets his students get away with breaking the rules? Lily demanded. Yeah, seems like it, all four boys said. James snorted, saying, Mirror of Erist. Well, that's a clever name. How long has Dumbledore been coming there? Remus demanded, him knowing of all the times Harry's been felt suspicious, especially not having gotten in trouble before now. And how did Harry never spot him? James demanded. Search me, Lily said, shrugging. Well, it's true, Sirius disagreed. There are plenty of ways to pull off invisibility. But mine is still the best, James jumped in at once. Well, that was kind of depressing, Sirius said, frowning a bit at Dumbledore's description of Ron's mirror image. Dumbledore has this way of saying things that sound really smart, but tend to be balmy, James agreed. How many mirrors do they have hanging around that school? Remus asked, that had felt a little ominous to him. a warning about Harry coming across this again for some other reason. I think he was just in teacher mode then, Lily suggested, preparing Harry for the future and all that. Harry was feeling very frustrated all of a sudden, for some reason knowing quite well that he would come across that mirror again. Why though, he still had no clue. I hate it when people point out you just asked a question when asking if they could ask a question. James grumbled. It's like they're marking you for using your manners. That's why I just blurt out whatever I want, Sirius said happily. Remus said, looking at Lily oddly. Want to run that by me again? When she did, all five of them exchanged looks and said as one, liar. There was no way anyone's heart's desire could be socks. Harry felt frustrated, shaking his head from side to side. Would this feeling ever go away? Why did he know that answer, but couldn't actually seem to answer it himself? The other four adults just felt a little frustrated, Lily even saying, well, that hardly seemed fair. He knew Harry's. It is a personal question, Remus disagreed. I can hardly blame him. Of course we would tell you, Harry, James told him, if any of us actually knew, of course. Lily shrugged, slightly agreeing with Remus and completely behind James on that. Well, Dumbledore can expect 5 lovely pairs this year, Sirius said brightly, as Dumbledore's gifts were mentioned without his apparent heart's desire. Harry chuckled at his antics, then pondered for a moment why on earth there was an importance to socks in his life, not relating to Dumbledore but someone else. It was gone as soon as the idea had come. At least you acknowledge it was a personal question, Lily approved. My turn, James said brightly. Remus rolled his eyes, but held his tongue that he'd been skipped his turn, but honestly wasn't going to protest either with this track record. Chapter 14. Nicola's Flame. Chapter text. Despite the emotional baggage of that chapter, James was very pleased indeed that Harry seemed to have gotten the idea of that dog out of his son's mind. He was all for focusing on Harry finding Nicola's flame, however, or even moving past that, and going along his school looking for something more fun to do, and so read on eagerly. Though it didn't last, as the start only affirmed Harry's nightmares, similar to ones they'd all be having soon. Not appreciated, not one little bit, Sirius said, shuddering in disgust, and not mentioning that he had a very similar nightmare the previous night. Sorry, Harry said honestly. It's not your fault, James said, a shade paler than normal. It's not like you can help what you dream. He'd have only threatened to string you up by your thumbs or something. Sirius shrugged off whatever Hermione's fear of Filch was. Since they hadn't actually been caught, it seemed rather funny to him. Did she expect you to find Flamel, honestly? Remus chuckled. So we were right the first time, Remus said sadly. Harry might not figure this out for years. Oh, come on, James said bracingly. I'm sure he'll find a Dumbledore chocolate frog card again. We don't know how rare they are in this time, Sirius reminded him. And he most likely won't reread it if he does, Remus agreed. Well, then he should start trying to memorize them in his free time, James laughed. Beating anyone in Quidditch is always a good motive, James and Sirius agreed. Also true, the two players agreed to the statement of harder trainings meant less dreams all around, especially nightmares. The good mood just couldn't seem to last, though, when James dumped the news of who was refereeing the next match. What? The uproar was so loud, the neighbors may have heard that. James, tell me you're joking, Sirius said, looking faint. James just sat there, frozen as he stared at the page. But he can't, Lily said weakly. Madam Hooch always referees. He would have had to get Dumbledore to say yes, Remus agreed, running his hand through his hair in frustration. Which means that Dumbledore didn't have a problem with this. I have a problem with this, James yelped in disgust. Couldn't McGonagall have protested on bias? They all shared devastated looks, but then glanced at Harry, only slightly reassured that he was still sitting here, looking as upset as the rest of them, but still here. Safe and sound. Can't blame him, Remus muttered in disgust. He'd have fallen off a broom or anything as well. When does Snape need an excuse to do anything he bloody wanted? Sirius hissed. Let alone be more foul than ever to Gryffindors. James couldn't give so much as a passing smile to the news Hermione played chess with Ron, because it was something she actually wasn't good at. Humility is beneficial in the long run, Lily agreed, distracted. She knew for a fact she wasn't going to be able to settle down again until this particular game was over. And a good day to you two, James forced a laugh, being told you looked terrible, something he well would have said. Now that's a sentence I never bloody thought I'd hear in my life, Remus said, looking a bit queasy at Harry's phrasing of Snape's sinister desire. All three boys forced chuckles at the kid's suggestions for him to miss the game, while James pointed out, good offers, but Madame Pomfrey could fix that in a second. You could have a potions accident, Remus offered. Those get a bit trickier. And accidentally poison himself. Lily snapped. Got any better ideas? Sirius snapped back. Read and find out, Harry said loudly when it looked like they were about to start really arguing. James threw Harry a grateful look, then read on. Which is a bad idea, honestly, not having a reserve team. The former Quidditch captain shook his head. You should always have a backup team. Well, you can write him a letter later, Lily muttered. Damn, Sirius let out a low whistle. I'm impressed Neville made it all the way to the 7th floor. Where was he when that happened? Just think of going up one staircase like that. He doesn't know the counter curse, Remus asked in surprise. It's a pretty basic curse. James shrugged, deciding to read on. Well, that was rude, Lily huffed. She couldn't believe the whole common room, her son, fell over laughing rather than help. I can imagine it being a bit funny, James said fairly, but I'm glad Hermione fixed it, he said at once at his wife's sharp glare. Not that Malfoy prat again, Sirius groaned. What possible reason could he have for cursing Neville? As far as we know, Neville's done nothing wrong to anyone, Remus said. Seems to me that boy doesn't need a reason to curse anyone, James muttered. Ouch, Sirius groaned in real pain at the idea of hopping up from the library. Had to hop up a whole floor. I can't believe he didn't just go to McGonagall. Then he would have only had to go down some stairs, which would be far easier. Shame, perhaps, James said. No student wants to go whining to the teachers if they can help it. Lily shook her head in disbelief. She thought that was ridiculous, but could hardly say anything since she didn't exactly go to the teachers with all of her problems either. I think Ron's advice was supposed to be helpful, Sirius said, mouth twitching, but it didn't come off very well. At least he's trying, Lily said in approval. Why that little? James yelped, now wanting more than anything to punch that git in the face. He has no bloody idea what he just said. Someone needs to tell Neville he's the lucky one, Remus agreed. That poor dear, Lily sighed, but then she added on, that was very sweet of you, Harry. Harry smiled at her, knowing he would have done it again in a heartbeat. Much better, Sirius said approvingly to Harry. If that doesn't cheer up Neville, then I don't know what will. Yes, all five of them cried with joy the second a Dumbledore chocolate frog card was mentioned again. So long as you look at the back again, you should at least find his name again, Sirius cheered. I think I just remember without having to look, finally, Harry said cheerfully. Yes, they all cheered again when Harry turned out to be right. They didn't even want to imagine the frustration if Harry hadn't remembered that. Lily suddenly burst into giggling, gaining strange looks from all of the boys. It's just that I'm thinking James read that card from memory more than anything, and of all the things he's bothered to memorize. Then she trailed off, still laughing. So Hermione read his name at some point too, Remus said in surprise when she darted off. I don't know. She seems like the kind who remembers everything she reads, James said slowly. Maybe it was something else Harry just read, maybe a book on alchemy, Sirius suggested. Still an overachiever, Lily said indulgently at the little girl getting extra books from the library. Well, that's just rude, Sirius laughed at Hermione shushing a question. You'd think Ron would be a bit more excited at having finally found out a lead, James chuckled at an understandably grumpy retort. So she did read his name elsewhere, Lily said in surprise. Guess even Hermione can't remember everything, James shrugged. None of them noticed both Remus and Harry seemed to be thinking really hard about something. Well, none of us knew it either, Lily said, rolling her eyes at Hermione's shock the two boys didn't. After James got done reading that passage on the stone, he looked up to see everyone in the room looking at him like he'd grown a second head. You mean that's a real thing? Remus spluttered. You've heard of it? Sirius demanded. As a rumor, he admitted. Like James said earlier, alchemy is one of the most untested studies. There have been stories for years that someone made a stone that could utilize its magic, but I didn't think it was real. You still could have mentioned something, Lily said, staring at him wide-eyed. Did anyone else catch on that elixir of life? James demanded. This thing sounds like a piece of eternity in your hand. You really think that's what's being hidden in the school? Lily asked in concern. This brought the other four boys up short. They had been so excited at figuring out this mystery, they hadn't come around to this yet, but now Remus said slowly, "Well then, it may not even be hiding from a dark wizard. Anyone would want it." Someone like a disgraced Death Eater. Sirius thought bitterly, but chose not to say that. He really didn't want to start another fight. "Why now, though?" James asked slowly. "Do you think Flamel may have passed away and he left it to Dumbledore? Or, hello, Elixir of Life," Remus reminded him. "I don't think that's it." "Well, now we know what it is," Harry said, finally cutting them off. "Now let's show what we did with that information." All four adults turned wide-eyed looks at him, Lily demanding, "Why would you have to do anything with this? You followed your curiosity because you stumbled across this. Fine. Now you know, and you can let it go." Harry gave her an exasperated look, but when he looked around and all the boys were nodding in agreement, he decided to keep silent. There was no need in preemptively getting yelled at for what he was sure he had done, if his gut was anything to judge by. James felt quite excited that at least one of their curiosities about this book had been answered so far, so he read on. "How current was that book?" Remus asked in curiosity of the man's age. Harry shrugged, saying, "I don't know, I didn't ask." "Yes," Lily said slowly, not arguing the point of it being hidden in the school. "That makes sense. But are you telling me Dumbledore couldn't have come up with a better idea than a place full of children?" "What better place than in plain sight?" Remus offered. "Yes, but since we've already established that someone did figure it out and is after it," James said, "I'm going to agree with Lily on that one." Sirius couldn't help but agree with them as well, thinking that anyone that had the powers to break into Gringotts and not get caught could certainly make it into the castle as well. Lily pursed her lips. James had read the kids suspect with a little too much conviction, and the other boys around him were all nodding in agreement. Unbelievably, though, none of them verbally agreed. James was a bit distracted, though, at the passing mention of Harry's next Dada class, Werewolf Bites. Before either of his friends could open their mouths to make a sarcastic comment, Remus snapped, "Can it you too, or I'll shove your heads into a lake." Harry was biting his lip to keep from laughing, while Lily asked in genuine curiosity, "I remember some of that lesson, but I thought there was no cure for a werewolf bite." Remus sighed, looking up at the ceiling in self-hatred before answering, "There's not, but there are some solutions you can use on the infected wound so it won't scar as badly." Harry cocked his head to the side as he investigated Remus, but thought it rude to ask to see Remus bite, so he just let James go on. "So long as you don't fall off your broom again, sure," Lily muttered, still in disagreement to Harry playing this next game, though she knew it would go unheard. "Did anyone put in an inquiry why your broom acted up last time anyways?" James asked, realizing no one had mentioned this. Harry shook his head, saying, "No, Professor McGonagall asked me about it, but when I told her I had it under control, she gave me a suspicious look and walked away." All four adults exchanged uneasy looks. This didn't sound like the Professor McGonagall they knew. Something was up with their old head of house. She was acting very odd around their Harry. James shook his head, still concerned, and decided to keep a closer eye on her actions. "I really can't believe my luck," James said with disgust. "I finally got a Quidditch chapter, and it's going to be awful." Harry was gnawing on his lip for a moment, then he suddenly cracked up laughing. "Just what was so funny?" James demanded. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I just feel like there was another record broken in this game. Can't remember what, though." "It wasn't the record for the most bones broken by the youngest seeker, was it?" Lily demanded. "No," Harry answered right away, shaking his head. "Well, then let's get to it," Sirius said with high spirits now. "Still can't believe Dumbledore allowed this," Remus couldn't help but say in disgust again. The news and mood didn't improve at Harry's sneaking suspicion Snape now knew the kid's knowledge of the stone. All four adults grimaced in disgust at this idea of Snape reading Harry's mind. If Snape had learned legilimency, Harry's life would be a disaster. At Harry's questioning look at all of them, Sirius said bracingly, "There is a form of magic, very difficult though, that can kind of do that. I doubt Snape can though, so you should be good. It's really difficult to learn." Harry cracked a smile at that, then asked his dad to go on. "Afternoon," Lily interrupted, clearly distracted with worry and catching on a small detail she asked. "Games usually start at 11 in the morning." "I don't remember, but something weird happened that morning," Harry said, shrugging. "Dumbledore made an announcement the pitch was going to be closed, so it got pushed back. I never found out why. The four of them were privately wondering if, perhaps, Dumbledore had heard about the last game and had been investigating something. Why would he have waited so long since the last game, though? His friends are really chipper, aren't they? Sirius chuckled, though he couldn't blame them one bit for this feeling of fear at never seeing Harry alive again. He'd likely be feeling the same way if the kid wasn't right in front of him as old as him. No matter how odd that still was. You mean the students don't just carry their wands around with them everywhere? James asked, more in shock of this than their plan. He always had his on him, even while on the pitch. Harry shrugged, saying, "No, Ron told me that teachers started discouraging it so that fights wouldn't break out in the stands." "Fair enough," Lily agreed. "Oh, I hope they used that spell on him," Sirius said with glee. Then when both parents threw him a severe look, he tossed his hands in the air and said, "Outside the pitch, of course. I don't want them to have the excuse now." Lily huffed, but James was appeased enough to go on. How is that not pressuring him? Remus demanded of Wood's disfavorable pep talk to Harry. "It's not like Harry can magically catch the snitch sooner just because he wants to," James agreed. "Really?" All four of them said, beaming at once to Dumbledore's actual interest in this very particular game. "Nobody would be dumb enough to hurt Harry with him around," Lily said at once, forestalling at least Remus and Sirius from saying the same thing, substituting Snape's name. Feeling quite chipper now, sure Snape was still going to be an arse during the game, but at least Harry was safe. He read on with high spirits. "Nah," Sirius said at once to the idea of why Harry thought Snape was in a bad mood. "He always looks like someone shoved a dung beetle up his nose. Maybe because of how often you tried to," Remus offered, fighting back a grin. "Gah," James said in disgust to Malfoy's insult to Ron. "They really should keep the houses away from each other, at least during a match." "How on earth would they go about reinforcing that?" Lily demanded. "And that's still not even fair. It is possible to have friends outside of your own house." All four boys rolled their eyes at her, but it just didn't seem worth the argument at the time. "I'm so sure," Harry muttered to himself for Malfoy's apology. "Well, now he's just provoking him," Lily frowned. She didn't even play the game and knew throwing the bludger at the ref wouldn't get you anywhere. Sirius gnawed his lip for a moment before grudgingly agreeing. "Yeah, okay, I'll give you that one." "Someone should call him on that, though," James said, narrowing his eyes. "You do have to actually have a reason for penalizing." Remus sighed and rubbed his brow. This was going to be a long game. "Can we please switch back to me in the sky?" Harry said, frowning back severely. He really didn't want to sit around and listen to Malfoy insulting his friends and unable to do anything about it. "I would if I could, Harry," James agreed, gnashing his teeth for a moment before continuing. "Oh," Lily smiled. "I'm glad Neville took your words to heart." "Because they're true," the other boys agreed. "I think I'd be much more offended if he didn't keep falling back on the same dumb joke," Sirius grumbled. "What?" the three adults without the book said, trying to cut James off, but he wouldn't hear it and kept going loudly to why Hermione would be screaming Harry's name at a time like this. "That's not accidental," Remus breathed as he caught on. "That one wasn't even funny," Sirius said in disgust, still too keyed up to get back to what Harry was doing to get to mad. "Yes," all four boys cried with high spirits. "That git had it coming to him," Sirius crowed. Lily was smiling to herself, not able to find any bad feelings about Ron finally tackling Malfoy. The boy really had been asking for it. "Loving this kid more and more," Remus said with an even wider smile. Neville joined into the fray. "Did he really take on both of them?" Harry asked, remembering vividly the size of those two boys. "And holding his own, it seems," James responded easily, yet his attention still more on Harry and how well he played his position. "Amazing," Remus yelped. "How long did that match actually last?" Sirius demanded, feeling giddy as a child. "Record short," Harry beamed, feeling pride blazing in him. This, he thought, was a real accomplishment. Nobody could just say he was a famous name now. He had done something to be really proud of. Lily and James suddenly squashed their son in a hug between them, causing peals of laughter from in between their arms. Only after they had all settled down did James finally manage to go on. "I think the official time was 3.5 minutes, Harry said brightly. Remus let out a low, throaty whistle before saying, "I'm pretty sure the record before that was 15. "Way to go, kiddo. Ron and Neville are a little busy dishing out their own justice," James grinned. "I'm sure he did," Sirius snarled, happier than anything that this overgrown brat hadn't been able to pick on this team for too long, but most of all unable to hurt his pup. Now that's an accomplishment I'll never forget, James agreed, forcefully ignoring the sting those words left in himself. He'd never take to the reminder of why his name was famous. I hope we get to hear how bad Malfoy got it, Remus said quietly to Sirius, who grinned vindictively. Hooded, James murmured. That was never a good thing. Are you sure you're not just jumping to conclusions? Lily said fretfully, picking at the hem of her shirt. Even she couldn't deny how suspicious this was. Harry shook his head slowly, the happy feeling gone at once as it was once again replaced with the pounding pain of forgotten memories. James sucked in a deep breath. Couldn't he have savored this victory at least until the end of this chapter, but decided to just read on? Can't blame you there, Remus agreed. Anyone would have followed that odd sight. Odd place for a teacher's meeting, Sirius muttered, shifting his weight about in agitation. Wait, 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 Remus yelped. Quirrell's in on it. So could he have been the one who let the troll in as a distraction so Snape could get the stone? Sirius asked, unable to decide how he felt about this. I mean, he seems like an incapable moron, so— Stop, Lily said forcefully before they could go on speculating. I want to hear this. Well, we were right about the stone, James said lowly. How did Snape know you knew? Sirius demanded. Remus was shifting his weight around. Maybe they were wrong. Maybe Snape had learned legilimency. James wasn't giving them much time to think about it. Why would either of them need to know? Lily yelped, going pale as a sheet. Obvious, ain't it? Sirius said, eyes narrowing in disgust. They're in it together or something. Oh, that's just so obvious, is it? Lily yelled, looking ready to breathe fire. Okay, you two, James snapped. Let me keep going or we'll be arguing for the rest of the year. Both of them huffed and looked away from each other in annoyance. Lily blinked several times, releasing a breath slowly. Oh, how she dearly wanted to think Snape was saying Quirrell wasn't being loyal to Dumbledore, or something along that line. If Save was implying that Quirrell's loyalty should lay with him, that Sirius was right, and these two were really in on trying to steal the stone. She viciously forced her thoughts to stop right there and allowed James to keep going. What do you make of that, then? Remus said, a rather ugly look on his face. Despite his earlier opinion, he was now thoroughly behind Harry and the others in thinking Snape was trying to steal the stone, and dumping Harry Potter out of the way was a nice little distraction for Dumbledore. He never thought he'd say it, or even think it, but it seemed Dumbledore had been wrong with this person. Exactly what you do, Remus, Sirius muttered back, that Harry needs to stay the bloody hell away from that backstabber. While James looked ready to defend his two friends, the other two looked torn, confused, and hurt. Lily just couldn't make herself believe it, not until Severus was walking out of the castle with the stone in his hand. Harry felt just as conflicted on the inside, but it was a battle of gut and mind. His 11-year-old memories had him totally convinced that Snape was up to no good, and that they had to put a stop to this. While his gut was telling him he was being an idiot, and to get all the facts straight. Taking a deep, rattling breath, James knew very well he couldn't post on either side. He had promised Lily he wouldn't press judgment, no matter how compelling the evidence. He also knew he would back up his friends till death, because he felt they were right. With no winning side to an awful argument, James simply kept going on. Shaking his head in slight amusement, James was more than happy to hear about these Gryffindor victories. Neville really is the kind you should draw into this group you've got, Sirius laughed, thinking briefly that if Harry did, they would sort of have their own set of marauders going. Agreed. Couldn't be prouder of the boy, Remus chuckled. Harry was smiling around at them all, feeling a bit more at peace now that his innards weren't at war anymore, and said, I think we just know Neville as a friend, but I don't think I ever get as close to him as I am with Ron and Hermione. James was still happy to hear that, so read on eagerly. Agreed, all four adults said, already having come to the conclusion that there was more than that dog guarding the stone. Sirius snorted and said, now Snape actually needing Quirrell's help with a dark arts spell I don't buy. Then besides Fluffy, who honestly I've no idea how to get past, Remus asked, what on earth is Snape and Quirrell trying to figure out? Who knows, Lily sighed. Hocus pocus could mean anything relating to any magic. Then she sat back with her lips pursed. The only thing she could think to add was that Sirius had just delivered a real compliment to Severus, but she didn't think he would appreciate her pointing that out. All four adults sighed in discontent. Why on earth wasn't this book getting any easier to read? When James made to pass the book to Sirius, Remus pointed out, "Ahem. I do believe it's my turn since Harry skipped me." Harry blinked, then blushed, saying, "Oh crap, I'm sorry. I just had a good feeling about Christmas coming up," and Remus laughed at the way Harry seemed to think he was actually mad before reaching forward and saying, "I think I might forgive you, just this once though." After taking the book and going to the right page, he glanced up to see James whispering into Harry's ear, "And every other time, don't worry about it." Harry's smile was all the confidence he needed to keep going. Chapter 15. Norbert the Norwegian Ridgeback. Chapter text. Remus began his chapter, feeling a mite concerned about what he was fixing to read. So far, ever since Harry's first week at Hogwarts, they really hadn't been able to go one chapter without Harry nearly dying, or all wanting to burst into tears at the emotional reminder that they weren't there for him. At this point, Remus would have gladly taken Harry getting a detention, at least to keep him out of trouble for a while. "Don't suppose any of the other teachers noticed how stressed Quirrell was?" Lily asked. Harry simply shrugged. He had no idea about that. "Pressing your ear is better than poking your head in, I suppose," Sirius muttered. "Not really," James wanted to laugh, but forced himself to say in normal tones, "Snape's just always prowling like that." "Well, props for doing Ron telling others off for Quirrell," Remus said. "But personally I think Quirrell's in on it for a cut. I don't see even Snape bullying a full-grown wizard into forcing him to do anything." All three of the adults agreed with him on that, while Harry was frowning to himself and thinking in annoyance that he regretted doing these things altogether. "You mean Hermione hasn't memorized every textbook in the castle?" Sirius demanded, faking real surprise. "She's just nervous," Remus rebuked. "I got pretty testy around exam time too." "Okay, I wasn't that bad," Remus acknowledged. 2 weeks tops, not 10. "Yes, well, you aren't 600-something years old." James rolled his eyes at Hermione. Now all five of them were laughing at this odd habit of themselves repeating these kids. "When do you ever stop studying?" Lily demanded. Really, she was happy Hermione had friends to pull her out of books from time to time. "Your friends have," James replied to Hermione's rhetorical question, "and it's worth it. The Easter holidays never are as good as the Christmas ones." All four graduates sighed in annoyance. "It only gets worse as the years go on," Sirius groaned. "Honestly, they gave you that 2 weeks off just so you have the time to do it," James agreed. "And that's why it sucks spending any extra time in the library," Sirius agreed with Harry. "Perfect Quidditch conditions," James and Sirius groaned at such a description. "Now that is a surprise," Lily agreed. "Hagrid wasn't known for coming into the castle outside of meals, let alone up there." "He's still subtle as ever, I see," Remus chuckled. "Nah, they found out about Flamel through the use of chocolate." James cried with glee. "I want to use that as a slogan and buy the company," Sirius laughed. "Hagrid's got a point," Remus agreed, fighting the impulse to laugh. "You were worried about anyone finding you out in the library before. Now you're the ones shouting about it." "Well, thank you, Hagrid, for literally inviting them over to ask you questions you'll most likely answer before they ask them," Lily said, rolling her eyes fondly at the giant. "I doubt Hagrid knows what else is protecting the stone," Remus said. "He really wouldn't even have that much to do with it." "Then what was he doing?" Sirius asked. Remus glanced down and, realizing they were fixing to find out, just kept reading. "Oh, well, that makes sense," James said. In his free time, he'd look up stuff about his favorite magical creature. "He was still acting pretty shifty about it," Lily disagreed. "What?" Sirius asked, raising a disbelieving brow at her. "You think he's got a dragon stashed away in his wooden house?" Harry startled a bit, his mind bursting to show him something in response to that, but he really couldn't see that happening, so he forced himself to let it go. Lily had to admit this was ridiculous, but none of them could think of another reason. "Now look what studying has done for you," Remus said with glee for Ron knowing facts about dragons being outlawed. "Course there are dragons in Britain," Sirius said, shivering, "and they're as bloody awful as you imagine." "Are you saying you've run into a wild dragon?" Lily demanded. Sirius got a very shifty look about him, but when the silence dragged on, Remus decided to spare his friend and keep reading. He knew either Harry or Lily We're going to demand the full story to that later. Sirius shuddered for real this time, and Lily dearly wanted to know which dragon had made him do it from Ran's list. If Hagrid acts any more suspicious, I'm actually going to start getting worried, James said, looking a little green. Blunt as a dull axe, Sirius laughed, coming back to the present for Harry's question to the gamekeeper regarding Fluffy and the stone. Thought so, Remus said with a sigh. None of them were surprised Hagrid didn't know more. It wasn't his place. Hum, James marked Hagrid's confusion, and Dumbledore's. Really, whoever's idea this was. Rubbing his jaw, he declared, tell a school full of children not to go into a certain room, and then be bloody surprised when students know what's in that room that can be unlocked with a simple first-year charm. Yep, that's a real mystery. Even Lily had to agree with that logic, or lack thereof in this case. Flattery is a sin even Merlin forgives, Sirius laughed, knowing this tactic all too well. For Hermione to be using it was certainly giving him a grin, though. He still couldn't shake off the goody-goody kid doing all this. Laying it on a bit thick, James laughed. Oh, but I bet it will work, Remus said. So all the teachers there did something. Lily mused when it did indeed work, and Hagrid spilled what he did know. I'm surprised they let Quirrell, James said, considering he had only started that year. Most likely they all did something relating to their subjects, Sirius said slowly, not disagreeing, but staying on track anyways. So what, if you have a well-rounded education, it might not even be too difficult to get down there, Remus concluded. Now hang on, James disagreed. I would fear for my life if I wound up on the bad end of half those teachers' wands. Plus, Dumbledore himself did something to keep that stone guarded. It can't be as easy as all that. But Snape has been there how long? Sirius argued. The other teachers would have trusted him enough that if he asked, they may have just told him what they did. Oh, not this again, Lily moaned. Got a better argument, Sirius snapped. Yes, Lily snapped right back. I wouldn't be surprised if all of the teachers knew what all of the enchantments are. So the only problem they seem to have is Fluffy. That's a mutual problem between both. Her breath hitched for a moment before she continued. Suspects. I say Severus is checking Quirrell to make sure he doesn't know how to get past Fluffy on Dumbledore's orders. Maybe Quirrell did something suspicious that he doesn't like, or... She trailed off, running out of steam at all the circumstantial facts that kept floating around. Really, neither one had a fair point, since both teachers had been in both places every instance. Remus cleared his throat after a nasty silence seemed likely to continue and said, How about I just keep going? I'm sure we'll figure this out soon. Harry was privately thinking sooner than you might think. Or it just gave him a better chance to go after it, Sirius huffed. He couldn't believe Lily and Hagrid were still defending Snape after all he'd done to Harry. There's a way to get past Fluffy without being torn in three, Remus demanded. Kind of hoping not, James said. That way that thing will stay down there forever, and this whole problem can just go away. I'm starting to feel a little bad for Fluffy, though, Lily said sadly, having just thought. The poor thing's locked up in a room that barely fits him, if it is a him. How is he going to the bathroom, or just to stretch his legs, and who's feeding him enough? Lily, James said in exasperation. I have full confidence Dumbledore and Hagrid are making sure that thing is being taken care of somehow. Remus still smiled for her concern. He'd been thinking the same thing and come to a few conclusions of how this was being done. For now he kept going, but was both surprised and horrified Hagrid seemed to be keeping a beast much closer to his cabin than Fluffy, something in his fireplace. You're joking, Sirius groaned. He really can't have. An egg, you're joking, the other three said in disbelief. No, I'm not, Remus said, looking at the book like it had just bitten his hand off. Who, how, why, Lily spluttered. I'm done, James said, flopping back against the couch in exasperation. I really am just done with this. Harry's first year, and he's come into contact with a bloody three-headed dog, a troll, and now Hagrid's keeping a dragon egg around. That's not even the worst. His voice trailed off as he still continued grumbling. All five of them were simply stunned into silence for a moment before Remus gathered himself up and began again. I wonder why anyone would want to be rid of it, Sirius gasped, looking like he was about to faint at any moment. Couldn't be because it's illegal to walk around with a dragon egg and play a game of cards for it. Of all the stupid, irresponsible, Lily grumbled. James still looked like he had passed out against the back of the couch. Because having a rare breed such as a Norwegian Ridgeback makes this all so much better, Remus groaned. His wooden house is the least of my concerns, Lily yelped. How fast do dragons grow? How long before we've got a fully grown dragon stampeding on the grounds? Sirius jumped like someone had just branded his side, and Remus didn't have the heart to tell them that dragons grew at a considerable rate. It would be born poisonous, be able to breath fire after the first month, and then grow approximately a foot a week, reaching full growth in less than 3 years, though dangerous enough to a normal person at about 6 months. With any luck, the egg would hatch. Hagrid would recognize he made a horrible mistake, and someone would get rid of that thing before the week was up. Hagrid humming to his new little bundle as he stoked the fire shocked James out of his stupor. He jolted into an upright position and cried, "Oh yes, humming to the egg will make it feel better." All 5 of them felt like a twitching mess. A dragon! How could it be possible that Harry would have to deal with a dragon on top of everything else this year? Hagrid would be fired for sure, Sirius said slowly. Despite his disgust at the beasts, he really didn't want Hagrid to get fired. He liked him too much for that. Still, he couldn't blame Harry for bringing this up to Hagrid, and hoped it would make the man see sense. A hearing in front of the Department for Control of Dangerous Creatures, Lily added on. Maybe a pretty large fine could be the worst, James said without any real hope. Remus read Ron's statement about wishful wanting a peaceful life with far too much understanding. I might think that was funny if he wasn't serious, Harry said. No, I'm serious, Sirius blurted out before anyone could stop him this time. Remus smacked Sirius in the shine with the book for that, while both of Harry's parents turned to him with pleading eyes, and James said, Harry, I'm begging you, think before you speak. Harry couldn't take them well serious right then. He was too busy laughing. Remus was almost sad to drag attention back then. The note from Hagrid saying it was hatching helped no one's mood. Don't, Sirius said at once. He had been rubbing his knee and giving Remus the stank eye until he heard that. Don't go, Harry, please. Harry gave him an odd look, but no one had the heart to point out to him this time how pointless that please was. Now that I will give them, James nodded for Harry, wanting just the novelty of seeing this happen. It might be cool for the first 5 minutes, until the bloody thing starts breathing fire at you, Sirius hissed in disgust. Well, that was a bit rude, Lily said to Harry. Hermione was only trying to warn you, no need to just shush her for her opinion. Harry shook his head, saying, No, I think there was someone listening to us, he muttered, just as Remus kept reading and confirming Harry was right. Oh, all 5 of them winced at this. While they all disapproved of what Hagrid was doing, the last person they wanted to find out was Malfoy. Remus couldn't help it either. He was rather curious to hear firsthand what a dragon hatching would be like. Sirius was edging away from the book with an annoyed look on his face. Here I thought all babies were cute, James chuckled at the description. Harry couldn't help a slight frown, though the longer this dragged on. From the moment he'd heard about the little dragon egg, he'd had some odd feeling he would meet this dragon, but it was coupled with a terrible adrenaline rush. Why would a baby cause that, though? Was it possible he was thinking about another dragon? How many of these things did he run into, though? It was a very vague feeling. He decided it must not be related to this one at least, so he pushed it aside for now. Sirius shivered in disgust this time, more than happy he wasn't there for this, and wanting to drag Harry away from it as well. Oh, great, Lily groaned. Any fascination she had gone in an instant. How soon can dragons start breathing fire? When they all looked to Remus, he shrugged and said, Why do you lot assume I know everything about every magical creature? Are you saying you don't know the answer? James asked in disbelief. He admitted, grinning widely. I was just curious why you thought I knew that. We knew you knew that because you're a know-it-all, Sirius grumbled. Nothing about what Harry just described sounded beautiful, James laughed at Hagrid. Sweet nature, then, Lily muttered, shaking her own hand as if having avoided the bite herself. Oh, he didn't, Harry said in disgust. What? The others asked him. Harry just waved Remus on, hoping dearly this time he was wrong about seeing someone in the window. Oh, bloody hell, James groaned, running his hand through his hair in frustration. If that's not Malfoy, then I'm a fish, Sirius agreed, wishing Ron had done more than give him a black eye now. Nosy git, Remus and Lily muttered. You mean he didn't tell? James asked in surprise when the next day rolled around. I don't know why not, Sirius said. Hagrid could hardly hide the bloody beast. No matter who he went to, probably Snape would have gone down there to at least investigate. Remus just shrugged. He had no idea what his motives were, and so read on. Now that's most likely true, Lily said sadly. It was just a baby. It would very likely die out there if left all alone. I think I could live with myself, Sirius muttered. This is just getting better as time goes on. Remus huffed at Hagrid, now shirking his own game-keeping duties to tend this thing. I'm rather inclined to agree with Ron, James said. Hagrid has lost his mind. I'm sure Dumbledore would come up with a fair solution, Remus said at once, and it really would be better for Hagrid if he went to him and explained, rather than a student telling. I can only hope Harry convinced him to do this, Lily said. All four adults puzzled at Harry's mention of a brother of Ron's, before Remus said slowly, No, I don't see how that would work. If his brother's all the way in Romania, but I suppose he might be able to get away with coming round to Hogwarts. The only real problem would be taking the dragon back with him, He trailed off. Lily was shaking her head furiously, saying, Ron could get his brother into real trouble for that. It's illegal to transport dragons without proper paperwork, which none of them have. Really, just go to Dumbledore, you won't get in trouble, James insisted. Harry simply shrugged, having no answer to this. I just want that thing gone, I don't care how, Sirius muttered. All four of them snorted with laughter at Ron choosing to remind Harry of his name rather than catching on to the idea. Come on, Ron, Remus laughed. Not only did your friend think of your brother before you, but you didn't catch that. Oh, sure, just send Norbert on a couple of owls, that should work out. Lily rolled her eyes. Thought you had astronomy then? Lily asked with a frown, hating to think Harry really was skipping classes for this. It was raining that night, and Professor Sinistra had a cold, Harry shrugged. We were lucky and got out that night. Are you happy now? Lily directed at them all. Harry and his friends are clearly using the cloak to sneak around the grounds now. To see a dragon, Sirius told her like he thought she was being daft. I will never be happy to hear about that. You lot snuck out to go see a werewolf. What's the difference? She demanded. James looked at her sharply and said, Never when we didn't think we couldn't handle it. Well, we had Hagrid, and we were handling it all right, Harry defended. Never mind, Harry sighed, placing his head in his hands as all the adults felt fear at once. Norwegian ridgebacks are poisonous, Remus said at once. Please tell me he went straight to the hospital wing. Pomfrey never asks too many questions. Well, his hand doesn't fall off, Harry said with only a little confidence. Okay, no more sympathy for the bloody beast, James said at once. I never had any, Sirius snarled. I'm agreeing with Ron. Hagrid's lost his marbles, Remus said, shaking his head in disbelief. Just fine. You know, I've been bitten by a dragon and all, Lily muttered snidely what she was sure Ron was thinking at a time like this. You think, James snorted. Charlie was being right helpful, even offering to play along without asking questions. A good brother and friend, obviously, but clearly had a tendency to state the obvious. Really, Remus said weakly. That's their plan. Carry a live dragon through the school up to a tower. Why can't Harry have any kind of normalcy in his school life? James groaned. There's the silver lining I was looking for, Sirius said brightly. This was all happening very soon. He wouldn't have to hear about any of this again. And it's gone again, he huffed, slumping back into the cushions the second Remus had kept going to describe Ron's hand in the morning. Ron's okay though, right? Lily asked in concern. I'm positive, Harry said at once. She definitely would recognize a dragon bite, Remus said slowly, but he should go anyways. Agreed, James said. She never asks questions about the injuries. Otherwise students might not come to her, try and fix it themselves, and real problems can start happening. You three are just so knowledgeable, Lily muttered, rolling her eyes. Then a new thought occurred to her and she asked, Wouldn't Pomfrey tell Ron's parents, though? Depends on how severe the wound gets, Sirius said thoughtfully. As far as I'm aware, they don't write home unless it's life or death. Lily didn't really look encouraged by this, but then she remembered a few accidents she'd had during school and was more than grateful Pomfrey hadn't informed her parents about it, so she couldn't say much. Yet another reason to love the bloody thing, Sirius grumbled. He'd already known it was poisonous thanks to Remus, but seeing Harry's face at the news somehow made it worse. She doesn't, all four of them agreed. Pomfrey would never fall for a dragon bite passing as a dog bite, but it only proved their point. No, James shook his head. I'm positive Malfoy have done this anyways without your brawl during the match. Not exactly comforting, Harry sighed. The mood still managed to go utterly awry with further news that Malfoy had staged his visit by borrowing a book from Ron, and then leaving with the one that carried Charlie's note. "Oh, bloody hell," Lily cried in exasperation. Yeah, I can't think of a single thing to say to that," Remus muttered. "Of all the books," James groaned, rubbing his face. "Please tell me this doesn't stop you, though." Sirius turned to Harry. "You've still got the cloak. So long as you're careful and you time it right, you should still be able to get rid of it." Harry pondered this for a moment before saying slowly, Yeah, I feel like we do still get rid of it," which brought a gleaming smile to Sirius' face. So Harry left out the part where he also felt like perhaps they didn't fully get away with it. "Poor dear," Lily muttered. "Fang didn't deserve to be attacked by that dragon any more than Ron." "I beg to differ," James huffed. Hagrid clearly could handle this, but it didn't mean he should be. "I don't think the baby biting him would do much to him, though," Lily murmured. "There's a fight you don't think about every day," James mused. "Giant versus dragon." "Don't," Sirius said at once. "Just don't." Remus didn't even try to hide the laughter echoing his voice as he read on. "Baby demon," Sirius muttered. A tale that shook walls was proof enough of that. "Yeah, no offense to Hagrid. I don't feel sorry at all," James said, just happy this particular crisis was being dealt with right away. "At least he thought ahead and put him in a crate," Lily smiled. "I had just pictured trying to put a muzzle on it or something." "Could he really not whip up a sleeping draught for it?" James sighed. "Not without knowing all kinds of things about the dragon, its weight, for example. Otherwise, they could accidentally kill it," Lily disagreed. "Let's just be happy with the box for now," Remus cut in. Hagrid, trying to take the precaution of giving him a bear in case he got lonely, was met with disdain, mostly by Sirius. "Or gets bored and wants to tear something up." Sirius rolled his eyes. "Well, that happened quicker than I thought." He laughed at being proven right the very next line. "Good, then don't ever forget him from far, far away," James said slowly. "And do us all a favor and don't ever try to replace him," Lily agreed. "It was almost as heavy as Fang by then," Harry sighed, flexing his fingers and remembering carrying the beast up all those stairs. "She?" James asked. Harry blinked, frowning to himself, having no idea where that came from, and corrected, Yeah, I meant he." It did help that the next thing to be mentioned was Malfoy being caught by McGonagall. "You know what?" Sirius said brightly. "I think I'll forgive this whole bloody incident, so long as Ron's hand is okay, just for that one beautiful moment." "Hear, hear," the other four agreed, looking like they wanted to start dancing with joy as such a kid got the payback he deserved for butting into others' business. "The ironic thing is," Remus laughed, "Malfoy's telling the truth. He was still trying to do the right thing, though," Lily said, instantly feeling bad for her initial glee. "For the wrong reasons," James disagreed. "A well-deserved feeling," James laughed, picturing it in his head of a little bushy-haired girl, normally with her nose pressed to a book, actually bouncing around and singing a joy like a proper child should be. "I really want to know what Charlie told these friends of his," Lily said mildly. "They must be some really good fellas to have somehow been convinced to meet a couple of kids on top of a tower and transport an illegal dragon around." "I don't care in the slightest, since it clearly worked," Sirius snickered. "Thank you," they all breathed. "And let you never again have to go near a bloody dragon," Sirius vowed. Harry couldn't decide right then, tell them all that he felt very sure he would indeed run into a dragon again, or ask Sirius what his problems with dragons were. The others had already agreed with Sirius, though, and Remus was reading on happily. "So?" James asked. It's not like Filch could see them. Remus was reading with dread in his voice now. He didn't like what the book was implying. "I hate the way he talks to that bloody cat," Sirius muttered. "You did what?" all four adults asked in disbelief. "My favorite chapter of this book, because baby dragon. Yes, I am Hagrid." Chapter 16. The Forbidden Forest. Chapter text. Harry was rubbing his ear and looking more chagrined than they had yet seen him. Yeah, we may have been really excited and left it up there," he said, trailing off when it looked like the three boys were going to faint. "So, Sirius, want to tell me what your problem with dragons are?" he asked, trying to deflect the subject off of him. Shaking his head like he was trying to get water out of his ears, he said, "I'll tell you that if you tell me you got the cloak back." "Of course I did," he said at once, then frowned, rubbing his temple again in agitation. Sirius shrugged before saying, That's good enough for me. All right, fine. Remember how I said I went down into the lower vaults at Gringotts with my cousin Bellatrix? When he paused and eyed both Harry and Lily, they both nodded, Lily saying, "Yes, but you said you stayed in the carts." "I lied," Sirius shrugged. "I felt like an idiot, so I didn't mention it. But the truth is I got left down there for a few hours before the Lestranges came back for me. That bloody dragon hated me being there as much as I hated it, and he shuddered again in disgust as he cut off. "How old were you?" Harry demanded, feeling sorrier for his sort of uncle than he ever had for himself. "A teen," he admitted. "My parents were off with my brother getting his Hogwarts stuff, but they wouldn't give me the key to the vault, so they got my other family to go down there with me. I don't know what they were thinking, probably that you would steal all of the gold in their vault and make a run for it," James offered. "Very likely," Sirius agreed before going on, "but I meant I don't know what they were thinking leaving me with them. The Lestranges are known supporters of Voldemort, and they knew I hated them. I always swore they left me down there on purpose, probably paid off that bloody goblin too." He trailed off into evil mutterings. James and Remus had heard this story already. Sirius had been a little off at the beginning of their third year, and they had eventually wheedled this out of him. Deciding he wanted to stop the sad-eyed looks he was getting from everyone, Sirius snapped, "Oh, give the book here, Moony. I want to know how much trouble Harry's going to get in." He snatched the book away and began reading Harry, trying to make up a wild excuse to explain this mess. "Which is why you always have a cover story before going out," James said in what he clearly thought was a wise voice. "There is no way out of trouble," Lily agreed. "And if you do, I really will think something's wrong with McGonagall," Remus added. "Still not enough to get expelled, though," Sirius said quickly when he saw Harry was getting a little pale again. "I don't know," Lily said, a bit fearfully all of a sudden. "If Filch or McGonagall really do know about the dragon, believed Malfoy, they could get into far worse trouble than detention. What they did was actually illegal." "Lily, you're freaking him out," James snapped, as Harry continued to grow paler. Lily winced and said sorry, which Harry accepted, though he still looked like he was going to be sick. Remus finally said, "I really don't think so." "Norbert's gone, and all they can prove is Harry was up on the astronomy tower. The cloak is a bit suspicious, but that's all they can prove. McGonagall's always been like that, punishing for what she knows you've done instead of what she thinks. All I'm hoping is that no one brings up Hagrid," Sirius said. "He's the worst liar there is," and then read on quickly. "Now that's surprising," Lily said. "Neville seemed like a good kid. What reason could he have for being out?" Sirius read on loudly over Lily. "Oh," all four of them said upon learning why Neville was there. "Are you sure you don't become better friends with Neville?" James demanded, "because he seems to crop up as often as your other two friends." Harry was smiling back at this memory, but had no answer for his dad. "I would tread lightly on what you say next," Sirius said wisely. "Wow," James said in surprise. "I've never tried that tactic, sitting about in silence and letting her come up with a story herself." "I don't think it's making things any better," Remus said sadly. Boy, was she off the mark on that one. "Poor dear," Lily sighed. It didn't seem fair Neville had been dragged into all of this, and now he might even think the worst of Harry. "I'm kind of offended McGonagall thinks Harry would think it's funny Neville would get caught," Sirius huffed. "Well, to be fair," Remus said, "we didn't segregate our house from our pranks either. She's probably thinking along those lines." "Really?" All five of them balked. "Never caught four students out of bed in one night, huh?" Remus demanded again just to make sure he'd heard that right. "I do believe she's lost her mind," Sirius laughed. "Perhaps she just said that so Harry wouldn't get any ideas about you," Lily offered to her husband. "But he doesn't know anything about me," James said, ignoring the wince of pain that caused. "Oh, Harry, don't," James groaned. "If you try to argue with her, she'll double it." Sirius read out sadly. "And here I thought this night was going so well," Remus muttered. "Ouch." All five of them winced when it turned into around 150. "Again, I feel almost insulted she seems to have forgotten us." James wanted to laugh, but at Harry's utterly dejected look, he held himself back. "Shouldn't be too hard to get those points back," Remus said bracingly. "Between Hermione getting enough questions right and two more Quidditch games, you'll be back in the running in no time." "What's the record for the most house points lost in one night?" Sirius asked. "I think a defense against the dark arts teacher back in the 40s once made Ravenclaw House drop all the way to 0, James said. The kid went out to the forbidden forest, got into some kind of fight with the centaurs out there, and almost started a war. See, Sirius laughed. When you put it like that, what you did was minor. Harry smiled around at them all, honestly feeling much better now than he had then. To a couple of first years, though, Lily said sadly at Harry and Neville's dread, this would seem like a pretty big deal. They'll be pissed, all three pranksters said at once for the rest of their house. But like we said, James said quickly when it looked like Harry was about to get down again, they'll get over it. That's all that got around, Sirius asked. A couple of first years, one on of the towers. I think at least some of them would have been impressed by what you'd actually done. Sneaking into the astronomy tower could have some major fodder for rumors. Harry shrugged, saying, we didn't exactly help spread the rumors around. I've no idea what everyone thought we'd lost those points for. That popularity thing will tend to go back and forth a lot at school, Remus said. The more popular you are, the more it switches, Sirius agreed. This school's as over-dramatic as ever, Lily sighed. At least Ron pointed out Fred and George were known to cause just as much trouble and people still liked them. Exactly, all three boys said at once. Maybe they didn't lose all those points all at once, Sirius said, shrugging. But as a whole by the end of the year, most likely, James said. Oh yeah, Remus raised a disbelieving brow for Harry's sudden no-meddling promise. I'll bet that lasts, about a week, Sirius agreed. Quitting the Quidditch team. Now that is being over-dramatic, James yelped in shock. What good would that do you? Sirius demanded. Then you would just be sitting around, even more miserable. Harry frowned, thinking back to how bad he'd felt, just trying to make amends somehow. Glad Wood didn't accept, Remus agreed. This is getting ridiculous, Lily huffed, hating the way these kids were making her son feel. Just kids being kids, James said, not really liking this either, but he had enough familiarity with this type of thing that all three of them could brush it off. Even Fred and George, Remus demanded, thinking that was just a bit hypocritical of them, since he was sure that they were right in saying they must have lost their own fair share of points for their house. I sometimes got the feeling they were doing it more jokingly than anything, Harry shrugged. But yeah. That's ridiculous, Remus said in disbelief. I thought Hermione wanted to earn those points back. Keeping her head down won't do any good. She was just trying to keep out of sight, Harry defended. Yes, but it would have been better if she tried to earn points back for the house, and received a few annoyed looks along the way, Sirius argued back. Harry's silent promise not to meddle any more was put to the test much sooner than they would have liked. Well, this can't be good, Lily sighed, bracing herself for the worst. What on earth? James asked quietly. Quirrell was always a whimpering little thing, but this didn't sound like just whining. When you hear someone threatening a full-grown wizard, you don't move closer, Remus said, going as pale as the others in sudden fear. That's great, James muttered. Now get the bloody hell out of there before whoever was threatening him comes out to see you. Harry poking his nose into the very classroom was helping nothing. Or hell, they all whimpered, fearing the worst, though at least it was empty. Are you sure? Lily demanded. Instead, at the opposite side of the room was a second door, and Harry only didn't follow into that one because of his no-meddling promise. Yes, they all said, James adding on, please listen to that for just this one time. Great, let them duke it out and go away, Remus said at once. Why do you think you have to do anything? Lily demanded of nothing. Hermione's advice of going to Dumbledore was met enthusiastically, all four of them saying yes at once to this. Harry pursed his lips, declining to mention he doubted they did this. Dumbledore will still hear you out, Remus said, and I know he'll try to calm you down enough you won't feel like you have to do anything. Thank you, they all breathed. This punishment was the best thing that could have happened to Harry as far as they were concerned. He's not going to have to clean the trophy room or something, is he? Sirius groaned when the detention was brought back up. That was a favorite punishment of Filch's. 11 o'clock, Lily asked. That's a bit late. Sometimes the teachers do it, especially if this is a Friday, to kind of ruin their weekend, James said, having this happen to him a number of times. You kids are actually starting to depress me, Sirius said in disbelief. Really? James asked. I thought Malfoy getting a detention as well was the best part of all this. Outside, they all said in surprise. We never got detention outside, Sirius added on at Harry's confused look. Probably because 8 out of 10 times you were caught outside when you shouldn't be, Lily snorted. so they thought giving you detention out there would be more like a reward. He gives that speech every time, Remus laughed. He's never actually been allowed to do it, Lily told Harry when he began eyeing them with worry. Filch is delighted every time a student's being punished, James said with an eye roll. Bless irony, Sirius cackled. Their punishment for sneaking out at night and doing a favor for Hagrid is going out at night and doing something with Hagrid, James asked, looking like he was torn between envy and pride at this fortune. Still, Remus said slowly, what on earth would they be out there doing for Hagrid? Sirius read on quickly now. All five of them huffed at this. Really was Filch just a jerk to everyone? What? Lily yelped in shock. Relax, Lily, James brushed her off. The forest isn't even a punishment, really. What on earth would they be doing in there, though? Remus asked curiously. Maybe helping Hagrid with some nocturnal creature, Sirius suggested, a few coming to his mind at once. Now all four adults cracked up laughing at this, the three boys hardest of all. Wiping a tear from his eye, Sirius told Harry, we started that rumor about werewolves in there ourselves. Best to keep students out of there during certain times of the month, James added on, messaging his ribs. Even Remus was smiling slightly. They'd had some good memories out wandering that forest through the years. Why Filch is encouraging them to be scared is ridiculous, Lily muttered. Hagrid probably feels a bit guilty, since he got them into this mess, Lily said, at least hoping that was the case. If only someone would eat Filch already, Sirius sighed. Malfoy doesn't have a choice, James snapped. He may have been angry with Hagrid for his actions regarding the dragon, but his opinion of the man hadn't lessened any. Hagrid was still the one who had been taking care of his son for most of this story, and they all hated hearing anyone be rude to him. Harry's right fist clenched up automatically where the faint white scars were, but no one noticed but him. Even he wasn't sure what the mention of doing lines would cause in his mind. Remus was chuckling, saying, what kind of punishment is that? There's no lasting memory there. How I wish he would get himself expelled, Harry sighed. Really now, they all said in surprise in finding their reason for this. What on earth in that forest could catch a unicorn badly enough to make it bleed? Lily asked. The spiders, maybe, Sirius offered. I know there's some pretty awful ones towards the depths. A unicorn might have gotten caught in a web, and I don't know, come towards the edge looking for help. James and Remus nodded. This made perfect sense to them. That's an anomaly, though, James said, quirking a brow. Hardly anything in the forest is dumb enough to go back towards the spider den twice. You don't think it could be two unrelated instances? Remus offered. Now what are the odds of that? Sirius disagreed. I don't know. Maybe there's something new in the forest since we left. Lily looked far from pleased the longer these boys talked and said, and you still think it's safe for the kids to go wandering around in there? The three boys exchanged looks before they all nodded, James saying, sure, so long as they stick to the path. Everything in their nose not to mess with the path, 'cause that's how Hagrid gets around. Still looking unconvinced, Lily let Sirius read on, only pursing her lips up more though, hating to agree with Malfoy about this particular problem of something finding them, but unable to stop herself. The poor thing, they all said in real sympathy. Well, Fang being nothing but a coward didn't make me feel better at all, Lily said in a quavering voice. Now that sucks, James said. Can't they all go one way and Malfoy his own direction? If only, Remus agreed. What's with this sudden werewolf fascination? Remus asked curiously. Harry bit his lip, not wanting to admit what he'd been thinking then, but at Remus' wide, curious look, Harry finally blurted, I didn't know they were, like you. Quirrell made them seem like this really awful thing, and he trailed off miserably, but James gave him a nudge saying, lots of wizards say stuff like that. Remus was smiling at Harry without any kind of anger and said gently, I had to listen to it in class as well. Can't do anything but make the best of it. Harry smiled over at him, happier than anything that he knew Remus now. He also forced himself to keep ignoring this odd feeling that he had some other memory of Remus, or perhaps just another werewolf, and he was getting them confused. He really had no idea. To answer your question, Sirius said lightly, no, a werewolf isn't fast enough to catch a unicorn. Know that from personal experience, James laughed, now that had been a memorable night. Don't scream like that, Sirius, Lily snapped, rubbing over her heart. You bloody gave me a heart attack. Sorry, Sirius said, without sounding very sorry at all. Slithering, the boys asked, puzzled. Are snakes known to be in the forest? Lily asked. Not really, James shook his head. Any normal animals that wander in there get killed pretty easily or don't last long enough to be a problem. What are the odds of teachers in there as well? Harry asked hopefully. The silence that greeted this was more than an answer, as well as all of their scared faces. Is it even a full moon out? Remus asked, really laughing this time. Harry frowned, thinking back. I don't think so. The clouds were really thick that night, and I never got a proper look. Then just let it go, pup, Sirius chuckled. I don't blame you, James agreed. Seeing a centaur for the first time can be a bit shocking. Anyone you know? Lily asked, genuinely curious. We never got on a first-name basis with the centaurs, Sirius said. They never liked us creeping around them much to get acquainted. A bit, they all snickered. Nice to see how much faith she has in the school, Harry laughed. It was much easier to be relaxed, and thinking back on this night in this brightly lit living room surrounded by these people, though he couldn't quite fight back another wave of pain that was clouding him. Something really awful happened in the forest, something that he really was afraid of. Yet these three had wandered around the forest for years, and nothing too bad seemed to happen to them. That wasn't an answer, Lily said. Yeah, the very few times we did talk to them, they were annoying enough we didn't try very hard, James said, grimacing. All five of them laughed at this small, humorous exchange. So far this hadn't been nearly as stressful as they would have feared. Now that's beyond true, Sirius agreed, smiling to himself. Even they knew quite a few of those forest secrets, and yet still had more to learn every time they went in. Does Hagrid know all of the centaurs? Harry asked in surprise. Most of them, yeah, Remus said. He spends as much time in the forest as we did, but he takes more time to get to know the creatures in there. Yeah, we just kind of liked roaming around for the hell of it, Sirius laughed. That gag's not funny anymore, James said, rolling his eyes. This was usually the point in the conversation he and his friends walked away. I would have never guessed that, Sirius huffed sarcastically, thinking Hagrid should know better by now as well than to get a straight answer from a centaur. They all tensed up at this, none of them appreciating Hagrid's confirmation of what they all had been thinking. A cloak that could mean a wizard, which meant whoever was at school this year trying to steal the stone and kill Harry, it seemed, was most likely the one out there with him right now. Either that or it was still some new creature capable of hurting a unicorn, which wasn't any more kind to think about near Harry. Please let me just be paranoid and not right, they hoped dearly to both options. Crap, James muttered at once, any number of scenarios blowing through his mind for red sparks appearing in that forest. I don't care about the Malfoy twat, but don't let Neville get hurt, Sirius muttered. They're fine, I'm sure, Remus said, unable to keep the edge out of his own voice. One of them probably panicked, or... He trailed off and Sirius hurried on. Thank Merlin, they all breathed in relief as the two boys made it back with the gamekeeper. Like I said, Sirius spat in disgust, no pity whatsoever for that little twat. Hagrid, no, all four adults groaned. He could get hurt, Lily fretted, her panic at once going up about 5 more levels without Hagrid there to protect him. He'll just insult him the whole time, James disagreed. He still stood by what he said, that forest wasn't so dangerous so long as you knew what you were doing. The problem, though, was that Harry didn't know what he was doing, since it was his first time in. Plus, with Malfoy there, he really didn't expect reliable backup if something did happen. Okay, yeah, now his panic was beginning to rise again. Hagrid just wanting to finish the job did not make me feel better at all, Remus huffed. Please tell me you found it. Hagrid fixed it up, and you went back to bed, Lily prayed. All 5 of them were frowning sadly at the body of a dead unicorn. It was a true loss when something so purely good and magical was killed for any reason. Muscles were tensing up all along Sirius' jaw as he read the mysterious noise appearing again. He suddenly decided he'd take the magical creature run ins more than any dark wizard creeping around. They were all wound tighter than ever before, and no one had the heart to interrupt Sirius with pointless speculation now. Crawling, James breathed, so perhaps not an actual dark wizard, though none of them had any idea what it was, so the point still stood they wanted him out of there. That is wrong on so many levels, Remus said in disgust. If anything drinks a unicorn's blood, it's cursed, James whispered to Harry, pleased to hear whatever this was seemed more interested in the creature than his son. Malfoy's screaming just drew its attention to you, Lily moaned, nearly biting her lip to blood in worry again. Why didn't you run to? Remus practically screamed. They all looked torn between passing out or screaming at him. I froze up, Harry admitted, rubbing his scar and wondering why he remembered it paining him dearly. Wah, James whispered. What kind of thing can do that? Remus demanded, watching Harry now to make sure he was only remembering the pain and not experiencing it. Lily had Harry's hand clutched so tightly in her own, Harry was beginning to lose feeling in it again. Another unicorn. James wondered, pressing his shoulder into Harry's and resisting the urge to pull him into a hug for his own comfort. That would drag him away from Lily, though, so he'd settle for squishing his son. He dearly hoped the thing will be distracted and Harry will find his legs again. Harry was pale as the others, his hand that wasn't being pinned by this mother's massaging his scar. It wasn't hurting now, thankfully, but he did remember that fiery pain all too well. I take back every foul thing I said about centaurs, Sirius breathed, looking euphoric from the sudden relief he felt. I don't care who this centaur is. Next chance I get, I'm going out to the forest to shake his hand, Remus agreed. James and Lily were still a bit too in shock at yet another death moment their 11-year-old had experienced. That shook Lily out of her shock, saying, "Geez, how famous is Harry for the centaurs to know him by sight?" "As famous as Dumbledore," James said, the true scope of his son's fame being put into perspective for the first time. "Bloody hell!" Sirius looked more jealous than anything now. "You rode a centaur. No one in wizard history has ever done that, with consent anyways." "Don't tell me," Lily began, eyeing Sirius warily. "Don't be daft, Lily," Sirius said at once. "I would never do something like that." Lily nodded, admitting she was sorry. All four adults committed the name Forenza to memory, while Harry sighed in relief. The name of this centaur had felt really important to him for some reason. Was it possible Harry would run into him again? "That's exactly why no person's ever been on them," James said. "They think it's insulting." "Good thing Forenza is friendlier," Lily sighed. "Sworn by who?" Lily asked. "I've no idea," Remus said curiously. "No one really knows anything about centaur kind. They're far too secretive and hardly allow anyone around their land. Hagrid is probably one of the few people they've made an actual friend of." "That's ridiculous," James snorted. "Why would you only care about the future? What's the point in living if you don't enjoy the moments you're in now?" "Well spoken," Lily agreed. Harry frowned, rubbing his temple again. He felt bad for Forenza. He had clearly been set apart by his own kind, and he had a sinking feeling it was only going to get worse. "I don't care why Bane's angry," Remus snorted, "but I would very much like to know what you were saved from." Both Sirius and Remus gave a little huff of annoyance. Sure, they were grateful he'd saved Harry, but that didn't give him the right to ignore their nephew's very good questions. "And you only ever will use unicorn hairs and horn shavings," Lily agreed. "Defenseless is going a bit far," Sirius snorted. "You ever seen a unicorn charge you with one of those horns? Not pleasant." "Well, I did warn you not to go around that foal," Remus laughed. "So that was your own fault." The book slipped out of Sirius' grip and hit the floor with a dull thunk. All four of them had gone suddenly rigid as a new thought hit them. They hadn't been thinking this at all, but it did make sense in the most dark and twisted way. "Mum, Dad," Harry asked in concern. "What did he say?" James swallowed hard, meeting Harry's eyes fleetingly before whispering, "The Philosopher's Stone is being hidden at the school. It has the elixir of life in it, and a powerful dark wizard is trying to steal it." His voice trailed off as he looked desperately at his son, waiting for Harry to catch on, and he saw instantly when he did. Harry's wide green eyes went wider as he slowly whispered, "Voldemort." For the first time in a very long time, all four adults in the room shivered at the name. "But who?" Lily began, then her voice broke off in a choke. She looked like she was about to start screaming any second. "It makes sense, though," Sirius whispered, color beginning to return to his face, but it wasn't his normal tone, it was bright red. He continued on, still in a deadly whisper, "Who wants Voldemort to come back more than his loyal Death Eaters?" "Don't," Lily moaned, pressing her hands to her ears. It was too much. She couldn't get the thought out of her head. The first friend she'd ever had in her life. The young boy who had comforted her for years about how awful her sister was to her. The gangling teen who always sat around and listened to her, no matter how trivial. Then that last image. The last time she had spoken to her best friend, and he had insulted her in the worst way possible. It was because she had never forgiven him he'd been drawn into that dark circle of friends. If she had just forgiven him, given him another chance. She hadn't realized she was crying until Harry wrapped his arms around her in a comforting hug. While he and James were almost identical in height and build, she could still sense the difference. Looking up at him, she saw the sadness in his eyes mirroring hers, and the conviction when he said, "It wasn't him." Then his face crumpled in pain, and he looked like he was about to fall off the couch. James caught him before he could, and their temporary fear was gone in an instant at this real and sudden fear. Harry was clutching his skull as if it were about to burst in two. He was sweating and panting like he'd run a mile, and tears were leaking out of his own eyes now. Sirius got to his feet and made towards the kitchen again, but Remus called him back, saying, "He's already coming out of it." He spoke the truth. Harry's eyes were already beginning to flutter open again. He was looking around at all of them with sorrow deep in his eyes as he whispered, "Sorry." James helped him to sit up straight while saying quietly, "Aye, it's all right. You got your mother to stop crying, so that's something." Lily swatted him good-naturedly, but then pressed her lips together into a thin line to stop herself from asking any of the questions that were burning inside of her. She knew Harry was right. That was a memory that had returned to him with such force. But then what the bloody hell was going on at that school? If it wasn't Severus Snape who was helping Voldemort to return, she suddenly gave a vindictive smile, then waltzed over and smacked Sirius Black on the back of the head. "Ouch, what the bloody hell was that for?" he demanded, rubbing at the spot. They had been sitting around talking to Harry, making sure he was all right and no worse for wear from that sudden outburst. Lily looked down at him with a stern look and said, "You were wrong, and you need to apologize." Sirius opened his mouth to argue, then shut it quickly as he seemed to realize what she meant. "I was wrong too, Lily," Remus said, grinning slightly at the pair. "You going to whack me too?" "I'm considering it," she said honestly. The pair exchanged exasperated looks, then looked to their friend like help, but James just shook his head and said, "Can't do nothing for you boys. I promised Lily I wouldn't do anything to him until these books were over. And now I want the same promise from you two," Lily added on. They exchanged grudging looks again before both saying together, "Sorry." Nodding happily, she walked back over and took her spot beside Harry, brushing the hair back from his face and asking in her own way if he was all right. The boys made their way back to their own seats as well. The panic they had felt at the flooding realization Voldemort may not truly be gone dimmed slightly now. Harry was fully grown in front of them right now. It felt stupid they had to keep reminding themselves of this, but it really didn't help when moments like this just kept occurring back to back. And they all very much hoped they were wrong, but if Voldemort did make a comeback in Harry's time, they sincerely hoped he had better things to do than come after Harry. Perhaps he didn't even remember Harry, who knew what happened to a mind when, well, whatever happened to Voldemort to make him disappear. Sirius scooped up the book from where he dropped it and finally read on in calmer tones. Sirius still shuddered slightly, privately taking back every time he'd marked someone for shivering at Voldemort's name. He could finally see why they did, and he didn't like it. "Hoping that means Malfoy and Fang made it back to Hagrid all right," Lily said, looking about for something more friendly to think on. "Is he really safe, though?" Remus breathed, not believing that himself, until his little cub was back safe in the castle with Dumbledore at his post. They all breathed a silent sigh of relief, even the three boys promising right then they did not want Harry going back into that forest. None of them flinched this time when Voldemort's name was said again, finally getting over their shock for good. But all three boys were now fully aware why everyone else in the world did it. None of them planned on telling Lily this, though. They didn't think she needed another "I told you so" moment so soon after the last one. Harry shook his head, sighing sadly at his younger self, but utterly sure that 11-year-old him was wrong about Snape. If only he could remember why. "Can the planets show that?" Remus asked, truly interested. "I failed astronomy, don't ask me," Sirius said. "I've heard of branches of magic claiming that planets can foretell of dangers, yes, and I suppose the centaurs may be able to read even more than that," Lily said curiously. She had always loved astronomy. That's what Ron caught on. The name again. James snorted, moving just a little closer to his son out of fear. An inept fear, but it was still there. Sirius was stammering by the end of the sentence, for he never wanted to say those words again. "How on earth could you have said that with such a straight face?" Remus demanded. Harry simply shrugged, saying, I was having an out-of-body experience. It didn't feel that real to me, and privately thinking that, at the time, no one would really miss him if that were true anyways. That's about the only thing keeping me in my skin right now, Lily agreed. Dumbledore would protect Harry. Sirius' voice hitched. He didn't think he could stand any more of Harry's surprises without having a heart attack. James released a huge breath, admitting, Honestly, in all the chaos, I forgot to ask you when you went back up there to get it. Harry frowned, puzzling to himself how it had gotten there, and so were the others apparently as Remus asked, I don't suppose it has a note again, telling you who left it. Sirius read out loud. And that's the chapter, he said, tossing the book to Harry. Bummer, James said. It must be a teacher at the school then, Remus said, rubbing his jaw. Maybe McGonagall. She's in the order to. There could be a reason she would have your cloak, I suppose. Who else would give that back to Harry? McGonagall doesn't even know I own the cloak, though, James argued. Well, who else other than a teacher at that school would both recognize it as belonging to you and give it back to Harry? Sirius argued, thinking Remus had a good idea. McGonagall and Dumbledore are the only two I can think of, Lily agreed. Sirius wanted to argue that maybe it could still be one of the three marauders, but then that brought up the awful question all over again of where they'd been all these years. Also how they knew about the cloak at the school and sent it back to Harry. They had nothing new to go on, so he remained silent. James sighed, still rather frustrated at why those teachers would have it at all, but knew better than to think on it for too long. It's not like Harry knew the answer, so he instead asked if Harry was ready to read. During my original rendition of this series, I got a comment from CLH saying that the person was not pleased that Harry remembered it was Snape in this chapter, that it ruined the rest of the book. I made Harry remember it was Snape for several reasons, the first of which so that you would see what would happen and understand it when, in the second book, Harry remembers Ginny's alive. You recognize it wouldn't be the same thing as actually remembering. I do know it kind of killed the mood, but if Harry didn't do it then, when he saw his mom in such pain, then he hardly could have done it at a later time for possibly a lesser reason. Don't worry, though, the suspension for the characters is still going to be there, as I'm pretty sure this won't happen again the rest of the series. There's only one other moment I can think right off the top of my head where Harry will clearly remember something, but it's nothing you guys are going to guess. As always, to each and every person, thank you for reading and reviewing. It really does help me push past some rough spots. Chapter 17, Through the Trapdoor. Chapter text. Harry hesitated before answering him, though, asking, What's the order? You guys have mentioned it a few times now. Oh, they all said, blinking in surprise. Sirius said, It's an anti-Voldemort group. Remus gave him a light pop on the head before going into far more detail than that. Harry nodded along, wondering very much why he had such a sense of déjà vu of Sirius and Remus telling him these things. He shook it off and thanked them when they had answered all of his questions, and then read on eagerly. Well, since we managed to take our exams every year with the fear Voldemort would come storming in, I don't think the teachers would accept that, James said lightly, trying to force a joke into a deadly awful moment. Those anti-cheating quills work far too well, Sirius laughed. Sirius, did you? Lily began, narrowing her eyes at him. Oh, not me, he said at once. But I knew this seventh-year kid who had written a bunch of answers down in invisible ink on his arm, and he got them to come back for his eyes alone during the exam, right? Well, the anti-cheating charm made it so that the ink he used was then invisible to anybody but him on his test too. So he basically turned in a blank paper and made a 0. He trailed off in bits of laughter. Is that what happens to all the cheaters? Harry asked. No, Remus responded, his eyes twinkling with mirth. It's a bit specialized for maximum karma on each cheating student. Thankfully, not that many students are stupid enough to try, so I can't think of many more examples. Harry smiled and decided to keep going. You're not saying how you did, Lily said, wanting to hear her son's results. Harry thought a moment and said, I did all right on the tap dancing pineapple, but it fell off in the end, so I didn't get full marks for it. My snuff box still had whiskers on it, but I got 90% of it, so again I didn't get full marks, but I passed. He paused, puzzling for a moment and thinking about his other exams. He said, I didn't do that well in astronomy, did awful in potions, did really good on my Dada course, despite Quirrell being an awful teacher, really. What about her biology? Remus prompted. Harry nodded, saying, that one I did pretty well in. Let's keep going then, since I think that was all of them, Sirius said brightly. Points for irony, Lily chuckled. It was just like save to test someone with a forgetfulness potion. Your scar's not bothering you now, though, right? James demanded at once, still stuck on the oddity of it paining him at all, but since they still had no idea of who or why he'd rather ask this question than one he knew Harry couldn't answer. No, Harry said, and I promise I'll tell you if it does. They all relaxed at once at that. Did not want that mental image, Sirius groaned at Harry's descriptive nightmare. Your friends have more confidence the stone is safe, I suppose, James offered, having noted several times how little confidence his son seemed to have. Another thing he blamed those Dursleys for. And there's that, Remus agreed. Those exams were enough to make anyone study, even this lot of troublemakers. Oh yeah, they all said brightly, but it was so easy to forget about history of magic class. I did all right on that one, Harry said, shrugging. Not that good, but better than I thought. That's all anyone can hope for on that test, Sirius chuckled. Harry smiled over at him, then felt an odd wincing pain. What was it about a history of magic exam and Sirius that would cause that? Brushing it off, he quickly hurried on, not really liking the aching feeling that was growing inside of him. I bet she said they were all easier than Hermione was expecting, Lily laughed. The Werewolf Code of Conduct from 1637 is second-year material, Remus rolled his eyes. And so is the Uprising of Elfric the Eater, James laughed. I'm impressed you guys remember anything from that class, Sirius said, a bit dumbfounded. The three friends smiled nostalgically at where Harry and his friends chose to say, wondering if this happened to be the same tree they always sat under. The odds made it seem unlikely, but it would still be something if he did. Be careful with that giant squid, James said at once. That thing pulled Peter in the lake once for tickling it. He spit him out, though, Sirius said, laughing loudly at the memory. Now that's the right attitude, James laughed, having told Remus that more than once. There was just no sense worrying about something, especially exams they'd already done. Lily quirked a brow at this, saying slowly, the last time your scar hurt was at the start of term feast. What was dangerous about that? Their minds scattered, but they all came back to one idea. They hadn't discussed it yet, but since Harry had told them Snape definitely wasn't the culprit, then the only other person who might be was a stuttering fool who clearly couldn't stand up to anyone. Easy pickings for Voldemort to control, sure, but how? Many questions, not enough patience to wait around and speculate. Harry was already going on. Well, Ron's gotten better at reassuring people, Remus agreed. Hagrid wasn't telling anyone about Fluffy. I don't think so, Harry muttered to himself, churning everything he had learned so far over in his mind, but then deciding to let the book continue rather than strain himself again. He really didn't want another memory blast like the last one. What did you figure out? James asked. Harry wasn't listening. He had figured it out at the same time he had in the book, and he was too panicked to explain as he read on. All four adults sat there like they'd just been smacked in the face. Oh, bloody hell, Sirius cried. How on earth did I miss that? Remus hissed in self-disgust. Well, we were a bit preoccupied with the dragon itself, James muttered, rubbing his temple in agitation. Oh, I really hope Hagrid didn't. Lily trailed off, looking worriedly at her son who was still going paler as he kept going. I'm confounded, really I am. All three boys were muttering something similar to this. How could they have missed a detail like that? The convenience alone of the dragon shouldn't have distracted them that much. And Hagrid didn't find not showing his face the least bit odd. James demanded. Okay, fair point that, Lily agreed. They had all been in there at some point. Remus muttered something to himself. Yes, that's what they had thought at the time, but the timing. It was just too perfect that a dragon dealer would show up when Hagrid had information like that. Harry wasn't giving them much time for self-pity. He was reading on in too much of a rush. Oh no, Sirius moaned, wanting to smash his head against the wall. Of all the bloody, James trailed off in frustration. Did Hagrid not recognize the voice, though? Lily asked. Remus snorted, saying, Oh, please, Miss Potion Master, you're telling me you don't know a way to disguise your voice and throw on a hood. Lily nodded in acceptance of that. All four adults face palmed as Hagrid once again divulged the information of how to get past Fluffy. Except this time it wasn't to a stranger in a pub, it was to Harry. "It's official," James mumbled. "We are idiots." "Apparently all you have to do to get information out of Hagrid is just keep him talking for more than 5 minutes," Sirius agreed. "Yeah, great," Remus said, a bit of anxiety coloring his tone. "Now we know you can put the three-headed dog to sleep by singing it a lullaby, but Harry, you better wipe that look off of your face right now." They all whipped around to look at their boy, and Harry tried to fix his features, but it was too late. "Harry, no," Lily begged. "You didn't." Harry was gnawing his lip to pieces as he struggled to remember, saying slowly, "Something happens. I can't for the life of me remember, but something bad happens. So yeah, I'm going to say we did." All four of them leaned back into their seats, looking on at him in stunned disbelief. An 11-year-old boy went to get past that dog, and probably 50 more enchantments, after a fully grown wizard, possibly Voldemort himself. How on earth was this kid still alive? Harry decided to keep reading now while they were all still stunned. The boys were still too stunned to make a mention of where they knew Dumbledore's office to be, not that it would have made a difference then. Sirius opened his mouth, his mind actually starting to turn on again, and said weakly, "If those Weasley twins are anything like I think, they would know." "You're encouraging this." Lily blew up at him at once. "I'm encouraging them to go find Dumbledore's office." He snapped right back. "Geez, keep your hair on, woman." Lily deflated and apologized at once. This argument finally shook Remus and James out of their stupors as well. None of them were happy about what Harry said was fixing to happen, but it had already happened. So they would just try to make the best of it as they went and try to remember to breathe in the process. "What were you going to say?" James asked curiously. "Go to McGonagall," Harry replied, a small smile twitching his lips as he actually did remember who was about to come down the stairs. "Speak of the teacher," Lily said, trying to make a joke. "Well, I can't blame her for the suspicion," Remus agreed, forcing a smile onto his face. "Not many students actually want to go see the headmaster, since it normally means they're in trouble." The three boys snorted in real amusement at Harry trying to deflect with a secret, James saying, "Harry, you really shouldn't have said that." It only lasted one more line, until McGonagall told there would be no seeing Dumbledore, as he wasn't in the castle. Harry fidgeted hard, while the four people around him cried out in a panic. Before they could really start to freak out, the sensory charm went off, and Lily made a beeline for her baby's room. She came back down cradling her son, but then noticing how devastated the two boys on the other couch looked, decided to take pity on them and said, "One of you want to hold him while I get his bottle?" "I'll hold him," Sirius said brightly, forcing the rising panic very far down and focusing on the task at hand. "I'll get the bottle," Remus said, getting up and making his way into the kitchen before Lily could. Lily sighed as she sat back down next to her son and then asked sadly, "Is this the bad thing you mentioned?" Harry nodded, saying, "Yeah, sorry I didn't remember that." "Not your fault," James sighed, running his hand through his hair in agitation. Remus came back in, and the two boys had a brief squabble who was going to get to feed the baby. Remus won, and Harry decided to keep reading. "Timing," Sirius muttered snidely, none of them in any way thinking this was a coincidence Dumbledore would be in London the rest of the day, now of all times. "True," Lily sighed. "The man does have other obligations, but now, on the day of exams when all the teachers are the busiest, perfect opportunity much. To bad McGonagall doesn't agree," Harry said sadly. "That'll toss her," Remus said, surprised Harry would admit something like the stone so quickly, though it only emphasized how much of a panic he was in. "I'll give her that," James agreed. "It would be a shock for a couple of first years to have figured that out." "Suspicious of what?" Lily asked. "Probably thought this was an elaborate prank," Sirius offered, this being his usual fallback excuse. "Why?" all of the adults asked in shock. There was just no reason the man wouldn't be back until the next day. "He can just go to the edge of the school grounds and apart," Remus said like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "He'd get there, and they would wonder why he was there. Then he'd rush back realizing he'd been duped. Or the flu network, or a portkey, or bloody anything," James added on. Harry shrugged, saying weakly, "I've no idea." All of them sighed in defeat, admitting there was nothing else for it. "This is awful," Lily groaned. I can't even blame her for not believing you. This is pretty out there, but now you're going to. She trailed off, too horrified to even say it aloud, and none of them needed her to. It's not a good afternoon now that you're here, Sirius said hotly. Sirius, Lily snapped. You're saying you don't believe Harry. Of course I believe him, he scoffed. And I'll admit I was wrong about him wanting to steal the stone and all that, but it doesn't mean I suddenly like Snape. He's still been an arse to Harry all year for no good reason. Lily sighed as she looked up at the ceiling, taking that victory for what it was. Git, James agreed with Sirius. Did he really need to go rubbing Gryffindor's points in right now? That sounds like a horrible idea, Remus said in disbelief. I can't imagine any of you could follow a teacher without his noticing. Hopefully she goes to fetch the cloak. That will make it a bit easier, Sirius offered. But Snape didn't do it, James sighed. So following him is pointless. There's that too, Lily chuckled. Harry was blushing slightly. It's not like he'd known that at the time, so he was just trying to cover all of his bases. Why? James demanded this time. What good would it do you two to hang around out in front of that mad dog? Harry hesitated a moment before answering. We were hoping if Snape ran into us before he went into the dog, we could stall him long enough someone would arrive. Either that or go get McGonagall again and force her to come up to see Snape doing something, once he told us to go away. And it's too much to hope none of that happens. Lily asked without any real hope. The shake of Harry's head was all the answer she needed. She had already resigned her fate to what Harry had said they were going to do earlier. Maybe she did believe you and was checking on the stone herself, Sirius asked. Harry shrugged, pausing a moment to rub his ears at the telling off he and Ron were about to get. So that didn't work, James said sadly, wincing when he saw how downtrodden Harry looked. Cheer up, pup, Sirius said bracingly when he noticed this too. You survive at least. Harry sighed miserably and said what he had been thinking for a while now. It's just, looking back, I feel like an idiot. I was wrong about it being Snape. No one believed us even though something really wrong was going on, and nothing we did seemed to have made any difference. For all I know, Voldemort really does get the stone, and him coming back is all my fault. That's nonsense, Remus spoke up first before any of the others could protest. You were 11, Harry. Think about that for a moment. Yes, you were wrong about who was trying to steal it, but 3 first-years figured it out when no one else did. Through a bit of luck, yeah, but still, that's more than impressive. As for if, he stressed that word out, Voldemort did come back, it has nothing to do with it being your fault. I'd blame the bloody school and Dumbledore himself before blaming you for that. Harry smiled at him, but still didn't look totally convinced, until Lily said, Harry dear, think about all you've done in this year alone. All those things that gave us panic attacks, you got through them on your own, with the help of your friends. You're clearly a very smart, capable boy who's doing everything he can to do the right thing. We're all more than proud of you, no matter what comes of this. It seemed to take a while for this to sink in, but then Harry really did begin to smile, until he was beaming around at all of them. Baby Harry burped in Remus' arms, and the timing of that was so unexpected, they all couldn't help but laugh for a few minutes, just enjoying each other's company. Sucking in a deep breath, Harry read on with confidence. Kind of want to agree with Ron. My godson is mad. Sirius rolled his eyes. When he caught sight of Harry's face, he quickly added on, in the best way possible, of course. Harry snorted in amusement before continuing. Hogwarts School of the Dark Arts. Now there's a horrifying thought, Remus agreed. Then Harry managed to say something even worse, going back to living with the Dursleys full time waiting for Voldemort to come for him. No, James said in fear. That is a horrifying thought. All 5 of them shivered in disgust at that idea. Then the 4 adults sighed, unable to argue with him after this speech, ending in the reason they were set on changing this. They wouldn't let Voldemort take them away from their son again. Did I mention how proud we are of you? James asked in a conversational tone. It never gets old to hear it, Harry said, smiling around at them all. Then we'll just have to say it more often, Lily said, running a hand lovingly through his hair again. Harry leaned into the touch, feeling relaxed and ready to take on the world, quite the opposite of how he'd been feeling then. Upset and angry at the world for leaving him in a no-win situation, or at least that's how it had felt. The cloak should cover all 3 of you, Sirius said brightly, as if answering Ron for Harry. It covered all 4 of us, at least our first year. Starting second year, we had to crouch, and after that, it never covered more than two of us at a time. Good to know, Lily snorted at this random input. Come off it, Remus chuckled. You didn't really think your friends would let you go alone after that little speech. I didn't want them to be in danger, Harry said sadly. Well, if they're anything like my friends, you couldn't stop them if you wanted to, James laughed. They were all pulled out of the dark path Harry was about to jump down, once again stunned in the face of Hermione Granger. Has anyone ever made a perfect score? Lily asked. Guess they have now, Sirius laughed. Going to have to agree with her on that one, Remus chuckled. Flitwick would never let a student be expelled after that kind of test grade. I would like to repeat that. The teachers of this school set up those enchantments. Unless she's reading past a seventh-year level, then I will be truly astounded if she comes across them, Sirius said. Harry merely shrugged. He had a good feeling that it was only because of Hermione that he had survived this night at all. Convenient, Lily muttered. Of all the presents Hagrid could have gifted Harry, it would be an instrument, something to put that beast to sleep. Not Percy, anyone but Percy, Sirius was saying to himself. He had already resigned his fate to hearing about more death threats to his little pup. He really didn't want it to be delayed by a prefect. You clearly weren't any better at lying then than you are now, Remus wanted to laugh, but he was still a bit too wound up to really. He didn't want to hear Neville got involved as well. Kid's got a point, James said. Don't suppose you explain everything and he comes along? Sirius asked. No, Harry said, wincing as he did vaguely remember feeling guilty for what was about to happen. Wow, they all said in surprise, not having seen this coming at all. Neville may have backed Ron up at that Quidditch game, but he'd never started his own fight. And here Ron was the one telling him not to let people call him an idiot, Lily said, finding even more irony as this went on. I don't think he meant them, Remus said lightly, still very glad Neville had taken those words to heart. This is the best Gryffindor student yet, James laughed, then looked at Harry and said, except for you and your friends, of course. Harry snorted, but still felt feelings of guilt as he kept going. Ouch, all five of them winced in sympathy. I suppose, since you were really desperate to get around him, that was the best way to go, Remus said sadly. Snape did that to me once, Sirius said in regret. Bastard left me stuffed behind the broom shed for an hour before James found me. Lily had her lips pursed, forcing herself not to say anything. Harry still felt really guilty for doing this, but then for some odd reason, he pondered why he had this feeling like Neville was going to be rewarded for it. Poor kid, they all said one more time, before coming back to the ugly realization of where Harry and his friends were off to so fast, and suddenly wishing Neville had really stopped them. Always hated it when Norris just stared at us, Remus said. I always loved the way Peeves talked to himself, James chuckled. You see, Lily, Remus said, bringing up an argument from much earlier, when their biggest fear in the world was Harry getting caught by Filch. Peeves' first instinct when he doesn't know what's going on is to call Filch. He does want to keep this castle safe as anyone else. Lily nodded, accepting this logic. Wow, James said with glee. I didn't think to fake the bloody Baron until the end of my first year too. Yeah, but you did a horrible impression of him, and you still got caught, Sirius laughed. Peter was the best at faking it, Remus added, laughing at his two friends as they made faces at each other. Well, he clearly bought Harry's, Sirius said in surprise. Bloody brilliant son, James said, clapping Harry on the back, then wincing when he had to remind himself where Harry was sneaking off to. It's rude not to close the door behind you, Lily rolled her eyes, wishing that was the worst thing about this situation. Harry sighed, missing his two friends more and more the longer this went on. He hoped they were all right whenever they were. Sirius couldn't help it. He cracked up laughing at that. Sorry, he gasped, getting the stank eye from Lily. I just couldn't help myself. Picturing that slime ball in a dress playing the harp, he trailed off, giggling like a child, and even Harry, James, and Remus joined in. Well, that was easy enough, Lily said in surprise. Wish that was all it took to put all dogs to sleep, James said, throwing a smirk at Sirius. Sirius put his nose in the air, ignoring that comment. Chivalry is flattery, Remus chuckled, though unsure if Ron meant it as a joke inviting Hermione to go first. Guess it would be a bad thing if I said they were lucky the dog didn't just land on the stupid door, James sighed. Still, can't believe these two doors are so easy to get past, Remus sighed. Speak for yourself, Harry grumbled, finding being in the room with Fluffy not a very pleasant memory, no matter what state he was in. And break your necks 'cause you're not old enough to know about cushioning charms, Lily muttered. You are getting far too noble for your own good, Lily sighed. If she thought it out logically, she was kind of happy Harry went first, because she knew he was safe and sound. If one of his friends had gone first, she might be afraid they would get really hurt, or worse. It still didn't have to make her happy, though. All four adults balked at this, Sirius demanding, "You couldn't have thought of sending Dumbledore an owl hours ago." It was too late by then, Harry defended, though really he hadn't thought of it until that moment. At their still disbelieving looks, Harry half shouted, "You didn't think of it either." That cooled them all down. Remus snorted slightly, not really wanting to think famous last words, but the thought flitted across his mind anyways. "Better than Squish, I suppose," Sirius muttered, keeping a protective eye on the Harry reading for any sign of injury he might remember. "Soft?" Remus asked. "Why would you go past a three-headed dog, down a long drop, just to land on something soft?" All of them noticed the edge of unease going into Harry's voice as he shrugged before continuing. "Not good, very not good," Sirius said at once, going slightly bug-eyed. "I'm agreeing with you on that," Harry said, readjusting himself. "I don't like this planted," he broke off in agitation, letting out a huff of frustration before going. All four of the graduates were going over every deadly plant they had learned while in school, and the longer this dragged on, the worse it was getting. Struggled. James asked weakly. "Devil's snare," Lily groaned. "That'll suffocate you unless you light it on fire," Remus yelped. Still not helping, Sirius snapped at them, then he turned to Harry and said, "Keep going, I want to see which one of you remembers that. How do you not notice it wrapping about you?" Lily winced in disgust. Lily was genuinely shocked that Hermione knew of what Devil's Snare was. It wasn't a common plant, and wouldn't normally be learned until much later in life, because of just how dangerous but inconspicuous it looked. She wondered how Hermione had come across this, but couldn't work up the nerve to ask Harry if he even knew. The boys couldn't help it. They all released a weak laugh. All of them could appreciate sarcasm in the face of danger. "While I understand the need for urgency," Lily muttered, suddenly wishing Harry wasn't the one reading so she could clutch his hand again. "When does yelling ever help?" Harry just gave her an exasperated look. All Hermione could seem to remember was that this plant liked living in the dark and damp, and Harry told her to light a fire then. "The bluebell fire she conjures all the time should work," Remus said swiftly, then winced when James and Sirius glared at him for that interruption. "No wood," Sirius said, looking faint. "Bloody hell, I suppose we should just be grateful she didn't shrink against the wall and freeze up again." "Lucky that girl reads more than any other human," James huffed. "Merlin, were they only past two obstacles. Devil's Snare is advanced, that is. Easy enough if you have its weakness around, but still a hassle." "I only hope her freezing doesn't become a habit," Sirius said sadly. "I hope they don't keep getting into situations where she has to freeze up," Lily snapped. "Don't," Sirius said at once, going almost white. "Don't you dare say there's a fully grown dragon hanging around down there." Harry paused for a moment before shaking his head slowly. No, he felt like he wouldn't run into another dragon that soon, before reading about an odd rustling noise reaching Harry's ears. Sirius shivered, remembering the clankers. This wasn't getting any better. "Not dragons, then," Remus said bracingly to Sirius. "What are they, then?" Lily asked. "Jewel birds. I've never heard of anything like that." None of them could think of what they could be, so didn't stop Harry as he read. All four of them held their breath slightly through this, not wanting to mention how dangerous that could have been just running across the room without any idea what those things were charmed to do. "I'm going to have grey hair by the end of your first year," James said miserably. For some reason, hearing his son make it through all of these horrible problems wasn't getting easier the more he heard about them. "They couldn't have used the same spell on Fluffy's door," Lily huffed to herself. She'd have been more than happy if getting in there had been as hard as getting out of this key room. "Charmed keys, of course," Remus said, rolling his eyes. "And they're all going to be identical, and you've got to know a seventh-year charm to figure out which key goes to the lock," Lily said, not really able to hide the hope in her voice that even Hermione wouldn't know that spell. "They weren't all the same color?" Lily asked in disbelief. "No," Harry said. "They were every color you could think of, and they all had different wing colors too." James couldn't help but give a slow clap in applause for his son, noticing something like that. the other two Quidditch nuts in agreement. Lily wanted to smack them all again. Sirius couldn't help the snort that came when he heard Ron nearly crashing into the ceiling. He was so stressed, any small amount of humor was welcome. "You're really taking charge of them," James said in surprise. "I can recall more than one occasion where you gave us the game plan on the spot," Remus told him. "What if the door locked behind you?" Lily yelped. "You should have kept that key." Harry shrugged. For some odd reason, he had no feelings whatsoever about going back through all of this. He had no idea why that was. Perhaps there was another exit where the stone was being kept. "How come Quirrell didn't keep it?" James pointed out. "Maybe there's some charm preventing it from leaving that room," Remus offered. After all, they weren't traveling along the open passage either. "Anyone want to take a guess what's next?" James offered weakly, his knee bouncing in both fear and anticipation. He couldn't help it. Despite the real danger Harry was walking towards, he and his friends had made it pretty far, farther than anyone would have given them credit for. When no one answered him, Harry just read on. "And guess who's the excellent chess player?" Remus said in disbelief. Lily blinked, then blinked again before whispering, "No way." "Something wrong, Lily?" James asked her. She pursed her lips for a moment before shaking her head, saying, just anxious for this to be over. Privately, she was thinking about coincidences and how she didn't believe in them. "Glad the answer of just win the game so obvious," Sirius snorted. "Be the chessman," Remus demanded. "You just said they were how big?" "No offense, Harry, but I don't really think just because you take the places of the pieces, you get their ability to break apart the other pieces." Harry was suddenly looking very nervous, fidgeting all over, and Sirius smacked Remus lightly for worrying the kid. Harry was feeling odd for a different reason, though. He wasn't worried about himself. "Ron, something to do with Ron here," he huffed and kept going. "Did you at least try to walk past them?" Lily asked with almost a hint at sarcasm, as she knew as well as anyone that wouldn't work. "Yes," Harry shrugged, "but they blocked us. Don't know why that wouldn't be mentioned." "They're transfigured then," James sighed, running his hand through his hair. "The castle and bishop aren't next to each other," Lily pointed out. "He meant on the same side of the king, not on opposite ends," Harry smirked. "I think Ron seems to rather be enjoying this too much," Remus said a little weakly. "Oh, good," James said, brightening at Remus' earlier words. "I'm hoping that means the white pieces will just walk off as well." "Not helping, Harry," Lily muttered. She wanted them to lose, to be stuck in this chamber until a teacher came down for them, or preferably Dumbledore. "Great," Sirius muttered, trying to stop a shaking feeling beginning in his legs. "Just what I wanted to hear. They're as violent as ever in the game." "That's got to be the most complicated game of chess ever," James breathed, "having to go the whole game without losing three particular pieces." All five of them shuddered at this, not liking that mental image, one bit of the strongest piece eyeing Ron the whole game. It was only confirmed when Ron realized the same, and what it meant for him. "No," Harry yelped so loudly, baby Harry began crying again. Harry shuddered, then apologized. James ignored that and said quickly, "But he's all right, yeah. I mean." He trailed off. Harry looked pretty frightened, and none of them could stand it if Harry's best friend was killed like this. Harry began weakly, looking around at all of them miserably. "I want to say yes, but I can't remember," and Lily leaned forward, smoothing the hair down on his head for a brief moment. Then his hair sprang back up again, and Lily forced a smile onto her face, saying, "Don't push for the memory. Just trust your gut. It's been right so far, yeah." Harry sucked in a deep breath before he concentrated, not on his pounding head, but exactly where his mother had said. After a moment, Harry opened his eyes again, and they could all see that he had calmed down. He nodded, whispered, "Yeah, he's going to be fine," and then read on quickly, wanting to get past this. What he felt was the worst part of the book so far. Harry's voice was stuttering worse than he remembered Quirrell's voice, so hoping to distract him and calm him back down, Remus asked, "One step? He didn't mean that literally. Knights can only move 3 paces." Harry was instantly distracted, his thoughts breaking away from that horrid mental image of his best friend falling to the ground without getting back up, and answered, Yeah, when I say he stepped, I meant he stepped 2 forward and once to the left. Right into the Queen's sight," he finished in a mutter. They all exchanged upset looks, but it had worked. Harry was marginally calmer, enough that as he read his voice was intelligible. Harry was shaking by the end of this. He could have done without that memory being restored, but it was over now, and he trusted his gut. Ron had to be fine, otherwise any permanent injuries he had would be all his fault. I thought Hermione was the castle, James blurted. 3 spaces diagonally to the left. Harry corrected himself, feeling out of sorts and not knowing why the book wouldn't have mentioned that detail. Did it work then? Remus asked. Harry shrugged. He had to believe it then as he had to now, convincing himself Ron would be fine, otherwise he wouldn't have been able to live with himself. Please be potions, Lily muttered. I can deal with a potions test. She had remained quiet throughout most of this, fearing she might throw up if she thought too hard about where her son was. Another troll, James said in surprise. That must have been Quirrell's thing, Sirius pointed out. Well, at least now you have practice taking that out, Remus said brightly. Lily was frowning, puzzling over it, before saying slowly, if that troll's been down there since the beginning of the year, and put down there by Quirrell most likely, why on earth wouldn't that troll on Halloween make anyone suspicious of him? Furthermore, Remus agreed, going wide-eyed at what he realized Lily was saying, none of them would have found it the least bit off he fainted at it. It's clearly what he put down there, since there's no other subject except potions, and for some reason I don't see Snape doing this. I think Dumbledore did know, Harry muttered, speaking without thinking. He just didn't have any proof, so he put Snape on him to watch him, ouch. He finished, pressing his hand to his temple. All 4 of them gave him upset looks, but Harry came back quickly enough. Blinking and rubbing his temple still, he huffed. Anyways, yeah, I've no idea why he didn't get sacked, 'cause you guys make an excellent point. The 4 of them gave each other agitated looks but didn't stop Harry as he kept going. Well, being unconscious already made it easier, Sirius muttered. Yeah, wouldn't want more troll boogies on your wand, James agreed. Snapes, Remus sighed, this might not be good. Oh, Lily said at once. That's a really difficult potion you have to make. If you get one thing wrong, you'll be poisoned before you finish swallowing. Ignoring the agitated looks the boys were giving her, and she said they freaked her out, she continued. But it takes weeks to prep that potion correctly. How on earth? She trailed off when she saw Harry giving her a small smile, then she blushed when she realized she'd done it again. Almost laughing at the look on his mom's face, Harry kept going, feeling very calm all of a sudden. That's a completely different potion, Lily said, unable to stop herself, but very similar to the purple flame, only one ingredient is different, so this just got even more difficult. James snorted. He loved his wife. Oh, I get it, Lily said brightly. The potions are already brewed in the different bottles, and you've got to use logic to figure out which ones. Very clever. I'm rather insulted you're so impressed with this, Sirius told her honestly. Lily sniffed, suddenly wishing she were in the room with Harry then, so that she could have a proper look at this riddle herself. If she really wanted to, she might even be able to figure it out right now just from these clues, but she allowed Harry to go on. Hermione's statement of some of the greatest wizards not having an ounce of logic amused Lily for just a moment. Sirius, she coughed under her breath. Oh, Sirius cooed at her. You just called me one of the greatest wizards. Lily twisted her face in annoyance at him, while the other 3 boys laughed at the exchange. Nah, Remus said, the happy feeling gone at once as a knot began forming in his throat when he remembered what was behind that door. He pressed on anyways. Hermione's the most logical witch at that school. You're in safe hands. Why wouldn't Quirrell have just drank it all? James asked. It probably magically refills itself after you go through, Remus suggested. You're sending her back, Sirius demanded. Yes, Harry said stoutly. He didn't regret this decision one bit. You think she'll go? Remus asked. Harry's friends seemed very loyal to him, something they all treasured deeply. Oh, she left, Harry said quietly, though he read for them. You recognize this now? James asked, feeling faint. Of course his 11-year-old wasn't a match for anyone. After all that. Harry shrugged. He really didn't have a plan when he had walked into this, and yet he had to admit he felt rather lucky to be alive right now. Instead of letting all of them get a comment in about how stupid he felt right now, he kept reading loudly. They all shuddered in disgust at the idea of Voldemort being in there as well, while Harry fought off the impulse to agree Hermione wasn't too far off. Luck, Lily muttered, looking faint. I very much doubt what happened then was luck. Harry gave her a puzzled look, wondering if his mother might have an idea what did happen that night, but he was too eager to hear about Ron being okay. You two are adorable, Remus said weakly. I almost burst into tears at that little speech, Sirius snickered. He agreed with Hermione, but it made it easier on him if he just picked on his little Harry. It was how he coped. I wouldn't lose faith in her now, James said. He had full confidence in the girl. Lily nodded. She had faith in the girl too, but the description of the correct potion felt reassuring. Well, the no Voldemort part was reassuring, Remus muttered as Harry passed him the book. Chapter 18. The Man with Two Faces. Chapter text. Remus took a deep, shaky breath and, stalling a bit, said, "There's not too much of this left. Your first year should be almost over." "I sure hope so," Lily muttered. "I can't take too many more heart attacks." Harry just smiled at them but warned, "I can tell you now, you're probably not going to like this chapter. I can't remember what old Quirrell says, but I know it made me angry." "Great," Sirius rolled his eyes. Something else to look forward to. "He's not stuttering?" James asked in surprise. Harry shook his head sadly, feeling like he should pop himself in the head, and saying, "No, he was faking it. I should have remembered that." All three boys couldn't help but snort at the description Quirrell gave Snape. How many times had they called him a bat as well? Lily muttered something incomprehensible. She felt like an idiot for not noticing Hermione had knocked into Quirrell, as well in her maid rush through the stands to save Harry when the book had mentioned it. Quirrell going on to explain Hermione's attempts to stop Snape saving Harry would be wasted. "Bless my soul," James breathed, looking like someone had just punched him in the gut. "You've got to be joking," Sirius demanded. Remus was just sitting there, staring blankly down at the page. Then Lily suddenly let out a whoop of joy, saying smugly, "You see, I told you he." Then she trailed off, looking suddenly confused as the others. "If Snape was trying to save you, if he didn't hate you like we thought he hated James, then what was all that crap all year?" Sirius demanded. "Oh, he hates me," Harry disagreed, "but not enough to want me dead." "That actually made me feel better," James said, blinking spastically in surprise. "I can hardly believe it," Remus agreed. Sirius snorted, but even he couldn't think of anything to say just then. Severus Snape had actually tried to save Harry Potter's life. What was this world coming to? Lily looked like she was about to start crying all over again, but they were tears of joy this time. Shaking off the last visages of shock he had, Remus now read on quickly. They had all listened to the revelation fully from Quirrell in stunned silence, but at this last statement about killing their Harry made any happy feelings tossed out of the room to be replaced by protective anger. "You throw one curse at him, and no cell in Azkaban will stop me killing you," Sirius vowed. "That's being kind," James snorted, a manic look gleaming in his eyes. "I can think of much worse things to do to him rather than killing." "Sign me up for that," Remus and Lily agreed. "Damn it," Lily snarled. "He's actually competent." "That's beyond a normal magical level," Remus said, voice edging into panic. "Wandless magic like that, the only wizard I can think of with that kind of ability is Dumbledore." "Or Dumbledore's opposite," James breathed. Sirius whipped his head around and looked at James like he'd grown a second head. "What do you mean by that?" Harry would have noticed if Voldemort was there. Harry groaned suddenly, pressing a fist to his temple but quickly shook it off, sitting back up and saying, "I think he is there, but I can't remember he's hiding or someone." He trailed off again, losing color by the second. "That's enough, Harry," James said at once. Then he turned to Remus and said, "Keep reading, it should explain soon." "Gift with trolls, eh? Is it because you act like them?" James grumbled. "We're all so sorry for your loss," Remus hissed. Normally he'd be laughing in agreement, or in this case disappointment. Snape hadn't gotten a leg ripped off. Who would have thought he'd be hoping that same man showed up? "Mira," they all asked in surprise. Remus didn't bother to think on it, but kept going. "Dumbledore put something up to," James repeated from looking confused. "Is this what Hagrid meant?" "I don't get it," Sirius said. "The mirror shows your deepest desire." So anyone whose deepest desire was the stone could look into it, and find out where it's really hidden. Remus snorted, saying, "I hope so. That means that it's actually hidden somewhere else, and then Quirrell will have to go off and find it there. All that set up, and it was never even down there." Lily rolled her eyes, still a little irked at the whole situation. "I'd rather you do the opposite," Lily huffed. "Let him find the stone and walk away. He might forget you're there." "Then I'll have come all this way for nothing," Harry said in surprise. "We'd rather you didn't come all that way at all," Remus sighed. "But boy, are we impressed you did," James added on at Harry's rather hurt look. "Which reminds me," Sirius said, "what did Snape mean by hocus pocus? Quirrell's wasn't an anti-defense spell." I've no idea, Harry said honestly, feeling that no one had ever explained that one to him. I'll give him that, Remus sighed. Even Snape isn't as scary as Voldemort. I'm just impressed this nit called him Voldemort, Sirius said in mild shock. Normally his followers call him the Dark Lord. That was pretty bold of him. Maybe he's just preening cause he thinks he's about to win, James shrugged, still not really interested in whatever this loon had to say so long as he stayed away from his son. Well, that's as tricky as it gets, James laughed. His deepest desire is to give it to Voldemort. So long as that's true, he'll never find its real hiding place. Ingenious when you think about it, Sirius agreed, because your deepest desire would be what you actually do with the stone, not the actual stone, therefore its location. Only Dumbledore, Remus said in happy exasperation. I'll take that, James said with a weak smile. After all, Snape not wanting his kid dead was far more helpful right now than what Quirrell wanted. No way, all four of adults said at once. It's not possible, Remus added on. Dumbledore was still at the school at the time. Voldemort could never get in. Lily and James shivered in disgust at the very idea Harry was that close to such a lunatic. Sirius groaned, saying, Do we really have to hear the ravings of Death Eater lunatics? I got more than enough of that at my parents' place. Sorry, Sirius, Remus said, and he sounded like he really meant it. I'm not skipping. Hope it hurt, James muttered, any kind of pain he more than deserved for what he had tried to do to his son. Yes, but I would have never thought anything of it, Lily sighed. Teachers come and go from Diagon Alley as much as anyone else. Though I do hope he explains how he broke into Gringotts, Remus scowled, as that is supposed to be impossible. Don't hold your breath, Sirius muttered. Probably some dark magic, or maybe a bribe to one of the goblins told him it had been removed or something. I feel like breaking the mirror wouldn't actually work, James said, a small smile gracing his features. But please do try, Remus said happily. That way the stone will be lost forever. At the moment, Lily asked, I don't think you get to pick your deepest desire. It's simply what it is. Maybe, Remus said slowly. Well, it is called the Mirror of Desire. Perhaps you can, in a sense, simply see what you desire at will. Dumbledore was the one that said it had to be your deepest. Dumbledore, James said the name like he'd never heard such a thing in his life. All right, James, Sirius asked. Dumbledore showed Harry how to use the mirror, he said, running his hand through his hair in agitation. And the last thing he said, next time you see it you'll know how to use it. He shook his head. He didn't believe in coincidences. Not one bit. It's almost like he knew Harry, but then he cut himself off, looking about the room like he expected someone to tell him he was being daft. Instead, they were looking at him like he had just made absolute sense, and they looked furious. Are you telling me, Lily said slowly, that Dumbledore intended for Harry to do this? She had been thinking this same thing a little earlier, but had hardly been able to fully form the thought. It was just too horrible to consider. Not possible, Remus said, though his tone wasn't very believable. After all, if the headmaster could be fooled by an idiot like Quirrell, what else could he be up to? But there's too much of a coincidence, Lily said, beginning to name the tasks out loud. Hagrid giving Harry a musical instrument for Christmas. Dumbledore surely knew Harry and Hagrid were friends. Could he have suggested a gift like that? The flying key room, testing his skills as a seeker. The chess room, where one of his good friends could test his skills. I'll give you the rest are questionable, but the others just line up to well. To be perfectly honest, considering the magic those teachers are capable of, I'd almost say it was easy. Sirius was looking about the room like he expected someone to say, Got you any second? When no one did, he finally said, I'll agree with you, Lily. She turned to face him, because his tone didn't really match what he said, which made sense when he continued on. But I think you're still a little sore at him for leaving him at the Dursleys. I am too, don't get me wrong on that. But come on. The man's had nothing to do with Harry's life since he dropped him off there. What possible reason could he have for testing him and his friends? Remus sighed, rubbing his temple, before glancing over at Harry and asking, Got any input? Harry shrugged, saying blankly, I feel like Mum might be right, but I kind of agree with Sirius, I don't know. The momentary shock and thrill at Harry actually referring to her as his mother, out loud like that, actually did distract her enough that she really did decide she could let this matter go for now. Remus nodded, and by now he had come to the conclusion Harry's first instinct was usually right. Still, with nothing to do in the meantime while they all pondered this, he kept reading. Great. The nutter talks to himself now, Sirius said absently. All of them who weren't reading were still only half listening, still stuck on the oddity that was their old headmaster. What? James yelped, coming out of it first. Remus read that again, Lily said, eyes almost falling out of her head, she was so wide-eyed. Remus complied, and they all sat there like stunned fish for a moment. How could that have happened? Harry asked, rather concerned by this reaction. I've no idea, James said. And that's why it's so bad, Sirius agreed. And if none of us knows how to do that, Remus muttered, then this clearly isn't anything good. My question, Lily said, ignoring how high-pitched her voice is, was who said that? Remus glanced back down at the page with ice-cold fear, forcing himself to read. Did your reflection smile before when you saw us? James asked, not really curious to know the answer, just trying to keep himself in the here, and now so he didn't freak out that Harry was now in such immediate danger. No, Harry answered honestly, though honestly he hadn't exactly been watching his own face. You're joking, Sirius groaned. Please tell me that was a really awful joke in which Harry now has the thing that lunatic wants in his pocket. Remus didn't even glance up at him, but shook his head swiftly from side to side as an answer before blasting on. But how? Lily couldn't help but blurt out. Really scary over-the-top magic, James grumbled, only having a few vague ideas himself. Sirius couldn't help it. He snorted in amusement, saying, Come on, you could lie better than that. I was under a lot of pressure, he defended, mentally adding he had no desire to share what his real deepest desire was with that man. Yes, please dare to make a run for it, Remus said fervently. Damn it, Sirius groaned. This dark magic, whatever it was doing this, just kept getting worse and worse. How? What? Lily spluttered. I don't know, and I won't if you keep asking me that, Remus snapped at her. At Lily's hurt look, he said, Sorry, we're all a bit on edge. Lily nodded, accepting the apology. Don't want that. Absolutely the last thing I will ever want, James was muttering. All four of them couldn't get the idea out of their head. Harry was in the same room as Voldemort. It was impossible, but Harry knew, instinctively somehow, he did not like what Remus was about to say next, if the reaction to feeling like screaming meant anything. A face, James said faintly. Out of the back of, Lily whispered. I'm going to be sick. Sirius groaned, and the green coloring made it seem like he wasn't kidding about that. He, what merged bodies with? Remus tried to say, trailing off in confusion or horror they didn't know. That's not. He's not even, Lily stuttered. Explains the magic beyond Quirrell's level, Sirius muttered bitterly. He felt itchy all over, like he needed a hot bath just from hearing about this. It gets weirder as you go on, Harry said, rubbing his temple again in agitation. His scar wasn't hurting him now, but he seemed to know that it was about to start hurting soon. Remus wouldn't have believed that until his 20-year-old cub fell into the kitchen yesterday, while the baby he knew and loved sat in Sirius' lap. There's a nightmare I'll never forget, James said in disgust. He really wanted to go wash himself in pure soap. I might be fascinated if that wasn't the most twisted, darkest thing I've ever heard in my life, Remus said in disgust. Great, Lily snapped scornfully. So our plan should be that no one ever wears something that covers up their head ever again. I am going to be sick, Sirius vowed. It had been Quirrell himself drinking unicorn blood. Even having an answer somehow made that whole thing worse. The second Voldemort stated he knew Harry had the stone. Run, they all whispered, that thought the only thing any of them could really focus on anymore. Liar, Remus and Sirius snarled, angrier than they had been yet. How dare anyone imply James would beg for anything? Harry could feel blood pounding in his ears. This was the part he had been remembering. He hated listening to someone say anything about his parents, but he also feared that the pain would be coming soon. When Harry shouted this was a light to Voldemort's face. His parents beamed at him, pleased to know that if Harry knew anything about them, it was this one truth. I might laugh if that wasn't the most disturbing sentence I've ever heard in my life, James said faintly. A man turning on the spot backwards, so the thing in the back of his head could keep an eye on Harry, was definitely one of the stranger, and still most terrifying moments of his life. Remus, voice almost stuttered out. He really didn't want to be the one to read this. To know details of how Voldemort had torn away a part of his family, starting with James. Then James surprised them all by puffing out his chest and saying, I'm not surprised one bit. He'd have to kill me to get to you too. Lily's lower lip was quivering. While she didn't appreciate that statement one bit, she wasn't about to argue it either. "Do you want me to read?" Harry offered, when it seemed Remus might pass out. "No," he said, bolstering his courage. If James and Lily could hear this without crying over it, he could certainly read it. "Of course I did," she hissed, her wand appearing in her hand, looking ready to curse the world any second now to protect her family. "And we don't blame you one bit," Lily whispered to Harry. Harry smiled around at his parents, never having been more proud to be their son than in this moment. "Hoping that bastard's done now," Sirius muttered in disgust, hearing that had been almost as bad as hearing they were dead the first time. "The potion would have worn off," Lily yelped in concern. "It would be dangerous for him to just go back through that fire. Would you rather he stayed in there with them? Him? How would you even?" Sirius began hotly, but faded off into mutters at the end. Harry couldn't help but burst out laughing at him, which calmed them all down. Since Harry was alive and laughing, and didn't have black burns all over his body from that fire, Remus read on with only medium anxiety, which immediately flew up to the highest level of anxiety it could get. Harry may be fine now, but how much had Voldemort/Quirrell hurt him before Harry gave up the stone? Blinking the red vision out of his eyes, Remus quickly read, "He's dead." Sirius spat, looking quite deranged at hearing anyone put their hand on his godson. "I don't care where he is right now, he is dying." "Not going to stop you," the others agreed, privately thinking they would all help. Harry winced, putting his hand to his scar again. There was the pain he had been remembering. "Why?" Lily yelped, pushing Harry's hand out of the way so she could look him in the face. "What spell was he doing to cause that to happen to you?" "It wasn't a spell," Harry muttered, frustrated that he couldn't remember why this was happening, even though it felt really important. "Keep going, Remus," James said evenly. He wanted to get past this part already. "Who'd have thought yelling and struggling would actually work?" Sirius said to himself, pleased beyond measure it had. "I've never heard of anything like that," Remus whispered. "Why can't he touch me?" Harry asked, bewildered. "Don't question it, run for it," James said quickly. Remus pushed the thought aside for now so he could read on. "Remus!" Harry yelped in shock as the book actually split down the spin as Remus ripped it. He didn't look very sorry, looking at the remnants of the pages in his hand like they themselves were Quirrell's skull. Lily waved her wand, and the book flew back into his grasp, completely repaired. Then she snapped at him. "What did I tell you? You told Sirius he couldn't ruin the book. You didn't say anything to me," he pointed out. "Wohoo, loophole," Sirius cackled, slapping a high five with his friend. All four adults were still breathing more rapidly than normal, the mental image of Harry being pinned to the ground and strangled one that would leave a scar on them for the rest of their life, they were sure. But the distraction had done its job. Harry was again laughing along at these antics, safe and sound, right here with them. Sirius cuddled the baby closer to him, and both of Harry's parents leaned into their son as Remus forced himself to go on. "Hope you can't heal that," Lily said nastily. Remus couldn't help but stutter over those lines of Quirrell actually going for his wand, but one glance up at the black-haired youth squished between his parents and he was able to finish. "Who was screaming, you or him?" Sirius asked. "Both of us," Harry muttered, still rubbing his scar. "You're rubbing that an awful lot," James frowned. "I just remember the pain really, really well. That's something I wouldn't like to have had back." His parents smiled sadly down at him, but no one could really think of anything to say to that. "Hopefully die from pain overdose," Sirius said in a chipper tone, then added on, "though that would kill my fun." Remus' mouth twitched at that, but Sirius seemed so sincere, he decided not to ruin that comment by pointing out that this act was clearly hurting Harry as well. It wasn't hurting him now, though, which gave him the strength to read. "Oh, I doubt that," James breathed. "Help arrived, maybe Ron and Hermione," Lily offered, unable to keep the excitement out of her voice. "Bloody hell," Sirius groaned. That wasn't a good sign. Was it possible other Death Eaters had arrived? "Geez, if you had actually stopped there," James began, then broke off his own sentence, not even wanting to say any of those next words. "It's okay," Harry said into the awkward silence. "I'm all right then. Nothing else happens for the rest of this year." Except going back to the Dursleys, he privately added. "Well, I should hope not," Lily yelped. "Isn't 5 deadly situations more than enough for all 7 years at school?" Harry gave her a sheepish expression, but didn't seem like he was going to answer. Remus didn't give him the chance. "Are you dreaming again?" Lily asked. Harry shook his head no, smiling now. His scar, he remembered, didn't hurt anymore. The opposite, in fact, he felt quite content and happy, if a bit drowsy. Strange indeed, Remus said, rubbing his jaw, more grateful than anything that whole ordeal seemed to be over. Who wears golden glasses? Sirius asked redundantly, since he knew Remus was fixing to read. Oh, they all muttered in annoyance. None of them had really decided on their feelings about Dumbledore just yet. This book was certainly implying a lot of bad stuff about him. Right to the point then, James said, frowning slightly. He really would hate it if Quirrell had gotten the stone after all of that hard work his son did. When the negative of this was told, I will admit, that's a relief, Sirius sighed. That she will, Remus actually chuckled, having much of a relationship with the hospital matron, amazed he could feel all right again after that awful last scene. How come you guys never gave me that much candy when I was in there? Remus demanded, unable to hide his smile. James snorted, saying, Please, if we gave you candy every time you wound up there, we put every candy shop in the country out of business. You're only encouraging him, Lily reminded, since buying that much would in fact be good for their business. Fine, then all of our teeth would simultaneously rot out, Sirius grinned. Never stopped you trying before, Remus smirked, but then he finally admitted he had let the joke drag on too long, so quickly kept reading before anyone else could throw something out. Sounds about right, Sirius laughed. Really, though, Lily asked, what did the school know about that? Harry shrugged, answering, I honestly have no idea. I never wanted to ask anyone. They couldn't help it. All 5 of them cracked up laughing at that. It seemed a lifetime ago they were reading about Mrs. Weasley scolding her boys on the platform about a toilet seat. Killjoy, James sighed, though like Remus, entirely used to Madame Pomfrey's ways. 3 days, Lily moaned. If it makes you feel any better, Harry said, that's the longest I'll ever be in the hospital wing. Then he frowned and rubbed his temple, annoyed at this random habit of his gut speaking and his brain paying for it. Lily looked like she dearly wanted to ask why Harry had wound up in there any other time, but felt it wasn't worth it right this moment. One-track mind, eh? Remus chuckled, honestly curious what had happened to it as well. His cub sure went through an awful lot of trouble to keep it safe. He did deserve to know. Okay, I'm not mad at Dumbledore anymore, James sighed. He clearly had come at a time when Harry needed him, which was the most important thing to him. Remembered why Dumbledore was supposed to be gone so long yet? Sirius asked. Harry nodded brightly and said, Oh yeah, it's because he said he flew. When he got to the ministry, though, he apparated back. I don't know how he flew, he didn't say. He trailed off with a shrug, having remembered asking him this shortly before he headed to the boats at the end of the year. Might have used of this Stral, like Hagrid at the beginning of the year, Lily speculated. We never even proved that's how Hagrid did it, Remus pointed out. Why would he fly anyways? Sirius demanded. Hagrid I can understand, but Dumbledore has every means at his disposal, asterisk Sirius. James broke him off. Let it go. We're not going to find that out. Sirius huffed, but did indeed let the matter drop. Remus shuddered in disgust. How many times was he going to have to read Quirrell had almost taken this child away like he had his parents? I guessed as much from the way Harry was passing out, James murmured to himself. The only reason he had been able to hold himself together was because of his living son at his side now. Then yeah, I guess I forgive him too, the other 3 agreed. Destroyed, Sirius said blankly. After all that he went and blew it up. James snorted, asking, Why do you assume the only way to destroy something is to blow it up? That's just what came out okay. I didn't mean it literally, Sirius rolled his eyes. The thing, Lily said at once, eyes narrowing dangerously. I think I might reconsider my forgiveness. Now, Lily, James began, but then she looked at him, and James quickly redirected, Keep going, Remus. To be honest, I don't think I want to live that long anyways, Sirius said. Be bloody depressing outliving everyone you know by a couple 100 years. Nutter, I swear, James snorted. It had plenty of instances being in order meetings to hear of such explanations from Dumbledore, but they never got old. Glad Dumbledore taught you that, James said proudly. It would drive him nuts to censor himself not calling Voldemort by his name because Harry still feared it. I'm not even going to ask if he said, yes, of course, Lily sighed, pressing her face into her hands in preparation for this answer. Well, then Lily's thing about having to show your full head should at least be applied to all future teachers, James muttered, still forcing down a shiver of disgust. Quirrell deserves it, Remus said without any remorse. None of them disagreed. You would think his followers would realize this, Sirius pointed out. Nah, they're too dumb to work for themselves. They need someone telling them what to do, James snickered. Let that be as true as it ever gets, Lily vowed, personally thinking about starting up a new department just for this job alone if it kept Voldemort out of their lives for good. Again, Sirius snorted, thinking back to the mirror and how they were sure he'd technically lied about that answer even if they didn't blame him. Which I would do every single time forever, Lily growled, a glint of something in her eyes none of the boys had seen before this day. Yes, James said eagerly. He had been wanting to know this since the first chapter. Why had Voldemort done this to his family? Why the bloody hell not? Sirius groaned. "'Cause I was too young," Harry said sadly. "Was?" James asked, eyeing him hopefully. "Are you saying he does tell you then?" "Aye." He hesitated for a moment, then accepting the pain that was coming he spoke with his gut. "Yeah, I think he does." The pain flowed through him, and he brushed it off as soon as he could, allowing Remus to go on. "I'm pretty sure we all hate to hear that right now," Lily muttered. "Yeah," James sighed. "I hope he bleeding answers that question. Quirrell not being able to touch you certainly helped, but was still odd." The longer Remus kept reading, the more curious his tone became. This was something he'd never heard of, and he still loved learning new things. Lily hadn't realized she was crying until she blinked. A tear traced her cheek down her face. Then she saw that Harry was smiling at her, and she whispered, happier than she could ever remember being, "So I saved you." Harry nodded, unable to speak himself. The three boys exchanged happy smiles, all thinking that if they had to die, at least they had left Harry with this small, precious gift. Their love and protection over him, even if they couldn't be there in person to deliver it. Each of them had questions of how this had really worked, as surely Lily wasn't the first mother to die for her child. But they decided to wait until much later to question the actual act of that magic. Just out of curiosity, though I'd really like to know the answer myself, why on earth would you think he'd know who gave you the invisibility cloak? Remus asked. It's not like you knew then what you know now. He's the headmaster of the school, Harry tried to explain. I thought he would know everything that goes on there. I don't know. I didn't even have anyone else to ask really. Fair enough, he agreed, albeit sadly. I did what? James balked. So we were right, Sirius said slowly. Sometime in the next year, the Order must find out about it, and everyone starts using it. Or Dumbledore could mean him specifically, in which case, he trailed off. Why would he need it? Lily asked what they were all thinking. He's already said that he can be invisible without it. Well, maybe he couldn't, Remus offered. There could be a million reasons why he couldn't have turned himself invisible, and he needed an untraceable way. Well, remind me never to offer it up anyways, James sniffed, privately thinking that he didn't care what the bloody Order needed it for. His family was going to need it more all too soon. Can't deny that, Sirius chuckled. They'd used the cloak for more than sneaking into the kitchens, of course, but Dumbledore didn't know about that bit. Ah, no, Remus interrupted himself. If Harry actually ever calls him Professor Snape and means it, mind you, I'll eat a quaffle. All of the boys laughed, while Lily simply rolled her eyes indulgently. Best answer you could have given, Sirius snickered. Yes and no, Lily said sadly in regards to Snape hating James, but since you already know that complicated answer, she trailed off, eyeing Remus expectantly, who took the hint. What? Harry yelped. Remus couldn't help but burst out laughing, and without looking up read. Harry ignored this, still eyeing his father. The three boys exchanged rather uneasy looks. That was a rather nasty tale for all parties involved, so James said slowly, "Well, you see, then Sirius cut in quickly. Let's start with, it was my fault, end with the bugger didn't actually die, and we can fill in the middle bit later, yeah." Harry nodded grudgingly, very curious to hear this. "Maybe Dumbledore will tell you now," Lily offered, though none of them really expected him to give Harry the full story. "Well," James said, looking like he'd just swallowed a lemon he spat out, "okay, fine. Yeah, call us even. But anything he does to you over the next 6 years is fair game for me to hate him again." Lily snorted, but none of them could disagree. "And I'm sure he did go back to detesting James' memory at once," Sirius said, in a false happy voice. That was a bombshell out of nowhere, Harry explained to the kind of confused looks. I think we've kind of worked out how the mirror worked, Remus said. But I'd like to hear him explain it anyways, Sirius said in a stuffy tone, so no cutting out. Remus gave him the stank eye before reading. James couldn't help but snort with mirth at Dumbledore's self-deprecation. Yeah, Remus nodded, about what I worked out. Know it all, James snickered, while Remus stuck his tongue out at him. But Quirrell didn't technically want to use it, Lily pointed out with a ruffled brow. So shouldn't that still count? But Voldemort did, Sirius reminded with a renewed shudder of disgust at the thought, and I think that's what made it count. If Quirrell had just been down there on his own, then maybe he would have gotten it on a technicality. It all depends on how liberal the mirror was with the spell, if Quirrell's intentions to give it to someone who would use it still nullified him. You scare me when you get all logical like that, Lily smirked back without argument. Black, Sirius retched. The nausea he had been feeling had died down, but he didn't appreciate the reminder. Never assume what flavor a bean is by the color, James said wisely. Otherwise chocolate-flavored can look like bark. My point, he laughed. You can say that again, Remus nodded in agreement. Another benefit of the cloak, Sirius snorted. We never asked for permission to go in there. You never asked for permission to go anywhere, Lily reminded. She thinks resting will cure every disease in the world, Remus muttered. Poor kids not being allowed to go in and see him, Lily sighed, then perked up at once saying, Oh, Ron's okay. Poor thing, I've forgotten all about him. Well, since Harry didn't wake up and find him in the hospital with him, I'm sure he wasn't too badly hurt, Sirius said brightly. All four adults again exchanged superior looks. They had a feeling Hermione liked hugging Harry a little more than as a friend, but as Harry had shown no reaction to this, since he only had 11-year-old memories, it wasn't too surprising. They said nothing. Damn near screamed as well, Lily shuddered. Well, when you put it like that, it sounds awful, Remus chuckled. A feeling I share, Sirius laughed. He'd long since known how crazy Dumbledore was. Entrance hall. James said, frowning, the owlery is up in the turrets and they were on the 3rd floor. What did they go down for? Took a wrong secret passage, Harry answered. He had asked them this himself later. Hermione was leading, and they were in so much of a panic, they decided not to risk taking any more. They wound up at the top of the stairs, and there was the entrance hall. He trailed off, then waved Remus on. I'll kill him, Lily vowed, encouraging you to do that. Lily, Remus said uneasily, but she looked like she was going red in the face as she snarled. No, Remus. Nothing you say will make this all right. Nothing Dumbledore says could make this all right. If he intended, I'm not defending him, Remus said hotly back. What I'm saying is give the bloody man a chance. Lily paused, giving him an odd look while he explained. You made us promise not to kill Snape because of what we thought of him. Well, now I'm asking you to do the same. Dumbledore is the greatest wizard there is, and while I can fault him for a lot of things in this year, he waved the book around just to make sure they understood what he meant. I'll not have you condemn him without all the facts. 6 more books, Lily, then you can go kill him if you want. Lily deflated, but finally said, Yes, all right, agreed. James and Sirius were looking between the two wide-eyed like a tennis match, but after a few more moments, Remus continued. Lily muttered something under her breath, but not loud enough for anyone to hear. She soon opened her mouth in protest again, but quickly snapped it shut. She came to the conclusion that if she started nagging on everything she thought Dumbledore did, rather than the man himself saying it, she was no better than the 4 boys around here this whole book. So she kept her mouth shut and contented herself with mental scathing. James groaned, saying, This is why you have a reserve team. Maybe they still won with a quick replacement, Remus offered without any real hope. Never mind, he sighed. Who did replace you anyways? Sirius asked. Some 7th year who Charlie beat out of the team all those years ago, Harry shrugged. He'd never asked for details to angry at himself for missing the match. Bossy, 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 Remus muttered. As good as her intentions were, the thing he hated the most about his condition was being cut off from his friends so much. Well, you can't blame her since that time we released a horde of fire salamanders our last day there, James chuckled. No one would ever forget that ceremony. Oh, Lily smiled. In all of this, I can't even be mad at Hagrid for his slip. Agreed, the boys all said. In consolation, he didn't know that at the time, Remus said bracingly, like Hagrid was really there to comfort him. Otherwise, I'm positive you wouldn't have said a word. I think they only send wizards off to live with muggles who can't be rehabilitated in Azkaban, James said, frowning. Hagrid's never done anything to deserve that. Rehabilitated? Sirius snorted. They bloody lose their souls in that place. Can we not talk about this? Lily groaned. She didn't want to think about that horrid place any more than possible, and Harry was looking a little funny at the mention of the place. True as well, Remus agreed. Voldemort wouldn't be much of a threat if he wasn't clever, and it was no leap at all to think he'd find some way to get past Fluffy without Hagrid. I've never tried that, James said thoughtfully. You think if we just yell it loud enough, people will get over it? Lily snorted and shook her head in disbelief, but since James clearly didn't mean it, she didn't say anything. Wish you hadn't met him, they were all thinking. Chocolate frogs cheers everyone up, Remus said, smiling eagerly. They were all very curious to see what Hagrid had gotten Harry this time. Despite the disastrous consequences of his Christmas gift, he was still the one person through this entire story that had been keeping an eye out for Harry that wasn't a student anyways. True, he had made some disastrous mistakes, but who hadn't in their life? Oh, Lily murmured, looking about ready to burst into tears again. Thank Merlin, James breathed. I'd hate for your only image of us to be some spooky old mirror. Harry was smiling sadly, very much wishing he had that book now. Having looked through it so many times, he would have wanted to ask exactly when and why each picture had been taken. Remus and Sirius exchanged very depressed looks, knowing that they probably hadn't been on that list of old school friends. You were in the book, Harry said slowly, looking at Sirius with a new light. Then he smiled and said, I knew it. I thought I had some memory of you, but it must have been your picture I'd seen. The wedding photo. Sirius went bright-eyed at that, saying, You saw me. That's awesome. Here we were both getting depressed. You'd never even know we existed. Harry smiled and nodded, but the moment Remus kept reading, the less sure he felt. There was a picture of Sirius in his parents' scrapbook, but that wasn't the feeling he had of Sirius. It must be, though. What else could it be? I just a déjà vu to your first day there. James wanted to laugh at Harry once again, getting all of the stares in that great hall. But at Harry's annoyed look, he held himself back. I wish some students hadn't taken to heart the advice of emptying their heads, Lily said lightly. James and Remus gave her annoyed looks, but Sirius actually laughed for a moment before he realized Lily had meant them. Then he just scowled at her without any real heat. Maybe next year you won't go pulling as many stupid stunts, and you'll actually earn points, Lily said without any real hope. James snorted. For some reason, he highly doubted that. Then Lily looked at Harry's face, and she agreed it was wishful thinking. Recent events? Sirius asked. They stop counting the last day before exams start, Remus puzzled. James went wide-eyed before he gasped. You mean he's going to award you 3 with house points for what you did? Harry muttered, Us 4, but not loud enough that Remus stopped to ask. I officially cannot meet your friend without laughing at him. James chuckled at such a vivid mental image as a sunburnt radish. That bumped you to 3rd place, Lily sighed. This didn't seem fair to her at all. Through the whole of their first year, Harry and his friends had constantly broke the rules and been awarded for it. The only time they had been punished, and still Harry was almost put in danger because of it. She really didn't like this pattern that was forming. So the school does know some of what happened, Sirius said in surprise at Percy's statement. The 3 of you are going to win that 150 points back, Remus surmised. But that would leave them 20 points short, Lily added up. So Dumbledore's rewarding you guys for what you did, but not so much that you beat out another house, James said approvingly. Lily sighed. She wished they weren't rewarded for it at all. She was proud of her son for what he did, yes, but if he came to the conclusion that it was all right now to go breaking rules and then expected to be awarded, they were going to have a hard 6 books to come. Never mind, they did tie. Lily rolled her eyes. Has there ever been a tie? James asked. No, not that I can think of, Remus said, so this might be interesting. All 4 adults couldn't help themselves. Despite how wrong they felt this was, they all said, Congratulations, and Harry's eyes light up like Christmas all over again. Mostly, though, they were just proud of him and happy that Neville had been rewarded as well for what he had done. What's done is done. Oh, I'm sure Snape's very pleased about all of this, Sirius laughed. Can't say I'm surprised Snape's opinion of you hasn't changed, James sighed. Disappointed, though, Lily muttered. Knocking out mountain trolls is a good memory now, Lily asked. Well, when you look back, yeah, I was pretty proud of that incident, Harry shrugged. Has anyone ever gotten such bad marks they were thrown out? Sirius laughed. You should try it sometime, Lily said sweetly. Why do you keep picking on me? Sirius grumbled. Because you know I don't mean it, she shrugged, eyes twinkling. Sirius couldn't help it, he smiled back. Pointless really for the purebloods to be reminded of the no magic during the holidays, James laughed. Even if they forgot to give them to you, the rule would still apply, Lily giggled. Oh no, Remus groaned. What's the matter? James demanded. Remus looked like he didn't know whether to be angry or sad, and it was rather an odd, torn expression. I've just realized where he's heading back to, he sighed. Crap, Sirius hissed in disdain. You know what, I lied, Lily told Harry, going a shade of red in the face at remembered anger. I'll take the mountain troll. Last you left, they weren't speaking to you, James groaned. So I suppose, if you just have to put up with that for 3 months, it won't be too bad. Harry kept quiet, knowing full well it was better not to say anything. He was thinking about the Dursleys to this lot, and just mentally preparing more calming speeches about why they shouldn't kill them yet. Despite the sudden dread, they all couldn't help but laugh a bit at that mental image Harry painted of so many wizards bombarding the Muggle station. Yes, all four of them said at once, glad Harry's friend didn't wait till another year to ask him around his place. Hell, please let him stay all summer, James begged. Harry blinked, having an odd feeling about bars being ripped off of windows. Something involving Ron, he had no idea. Wish you had told them exactly why you weren't famous at that place, Lily muttered. Why didn't you? Remus demanded. I just made some snide comments every now and then, like that first day I met Ron, Harry shrugged. He hadn't really believed that, whatever he said, he'd be taken away from the Dursleys, so he never thought to tell anyone. What good would it do? Lily rolled her eyes. How young was this little red-headed girl again? Harry, however, was smiling indulgently, like he thought that was the cutest thing in the world. Odd, though, since back then he just felt embarrassed. Why do you over-exaggerate every punishment you should have gotten, but can't be bothered in these moments? James laughed at Harry's summation of his school year. I can't believe the nerve of your ugly face, Remus grumbled, unbelievably after everything Harry had been through, still hating those Dursleys, and their very nerve of being around Harry at all. Hardly, Lily muttered scathingly. Family is the last word I'd use. Ron, Hermione, and Hagrid are better family than that lot of slugs, James hissed. Remus half considered it a bleeding miracle the man had even shown up to get Harry, considering the last time he'd only dropped him off as a cruel joke. Sirius puzzled over something, thinking back to those awful first 3 chapters when he had felt like a murderous psychopath, and came to the suddenly odd conclusion that Vernon had never actually called Harry by his name. He had just called him boy at every opportunity. It seemed a miracle Harry even knew his name. Well, the first chapter said Vernon never even learned Harry's name. Maybe this was implying he never had. Sirius couldn't decide whether to laugh at the man's stupidity or crack the man's head open and let all the dust out. You haven't heard the worst of it, Lily snapped of Hermione's innocent comment regarding Harry's uncle. Why would you suddenly enjoy your holidays? James asked. Because you know how to curse Dudley now. Harry just chuckled, that momentary memory of something bad happening gone in an instant to be replaced by what he had been feeling then. Oh, they all said brightly. Lily frowned in concern at once, as she knew full well Petunia did know that rule, as she constantly reminded it of her whenever the slightest odd thing happened. Hopefully Harry wouldn't get into too much trouble because of it. Okay, that could be some potential for a lot of fun, James said, an evil grin spreading across his face. That's the end of this book, Remus said, glancing down at the last 2 words. Well, I think it's time for dinner then, Lily said, getting to her feet. I can help, Harry offered, following her into the kitchen. No, dear, I won't even let your father help. This is my thing. Go badger the boys with 50 questions I know you've been holding back. Harry smiled at her, but did as he was told, walking back in to find them all laughing about some of the pranks they had pulled back in school, but there was a dark undertone to it. They seemed to be focusing on the ones that had disastrous, unplanned side effects. Several students seemed to have wound up in the hospital wing because of them. Harry didn't want to think about the Dursleys when he was in such good company now, so he threw out the first question that came to mind. So about that awful Quidditch match, Harry began cautiously. Really? James laughed. You want to bring that up now, after everything we've just read? Harry merely shrugged. As far as he was concerned, he was all right. He didn't even feel any lingering trauma from this, which didn't bode well for his mental health, or this gut feeling that this wasn't his only deadly encounter. So he did what he had been watching his family do this whole time: deflect. Yes, he said simply. Sirius sighed and began. All right, yeah, you've earned it. So it was my 5th year right, and just before the game I was mad and distracted, which is probably why I didn't notice that my little brother, Regulus, was a seeker for the Slytherin team in his 2nd year. Scrawny little git, I wouldn't have believed he could stay on a broom that was almost as big as him. Shaking his head in remembrance, though with his mixed feelings about his brother, he really couldn't decide if they were fond or not. He kept going. Anyways, so after I had basically ignored him for the past 2 years, I didn't see any reason to change that now, and the game went on as usual. That is until James went to make our 5th goal in a row, and one of the Slytherin beaters on the team lost it. I'll admit, I was distracted by watching Regulus, so I didn't see him. Guy's name was Runcorn, I think, Big Al's 6th year. Yeah, anyways, he knocked a bludger right at James, who didn't have the quaffle at the time, mind you, and I did what any beater would and dove down to intercept. Sirius paused again, frowning a bit and saying, Don't rightly remember the rest of it, since that's the last thing I remember before waking up in the hospital wing. Well, we do, Remus said, looking pale as he glared at his friend, who clearly looked like he wanted the story to end there. Knowing that wasn't fair, he turned to Harry and finished. Sirius was coming in from one direction to block the bludger, and Regulus came in from the other. He must have seen the snitch or something. James tried to cut away, but having 3 things pelting him at once, it's no wonder he collided with one of them, which happened to be Regulus. All 3 boys managed to dodge impact, however, but then Runcorn blew the second bludger in their direction, and still disoriented from that 3-way near knockout, one of the 3 didn't have time to move out of the way. He trailed off, wincing in disgust. It was awful, James agreed. That thing hit Sirius in the back of the head, and he fell nearly 40 feet to the ground. Everyone was distracted by calling a foul on both teams. I thought he was dead, Remus said, looking like he was going to pass out while looking his friend full in the face. I didn't even realize he wasn't in the air anymore, and when I saw him on the ground below. But I'm not, Sirius said loudly, mimicking Harry earlier, but hey, it had worked then right. Spent a while in the hospital wing, and then I was as good as new. Lily was looking genuinely upset for all of them. Not having attended this game, she couldn't even imagine the trauma of seeing that now. She had been listening in from the kitchen, rather curious to hear that story herself. Harry smiled around at them as he decided to let the story go. His family clearly didn't like revisiting the incident, yet this shared memory only reinforced what he knew for a fact back when he had first woken up and laid eyes on these people. They were all loving, caring, and his. Nothing would ever change that. Thoughts on Philosopher's Stone. The first book of this series does an excellent job right off the bat of showing you exactly what you're getting for the next 7. Yes, still 7, I'll get to that latter, books. Whimsical fun mixed with a healthy dose of this is some real shit you need to learn to survive. Magic is only introduced and teased until you hit chapter 6, and even then you only get the real-life experience of what's been building up in 8. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry is such a fascinating space. I swear you could throw the most boring person in the world, like Vernon for instance, in there, and you'd still find something interesting in that school. Harry being the focal point really makes you feel like you're there, because he's not much of an opinionated person. While traveling through him, you don't get his impressions. You just see what he does, and you gather your own opinion of it. The characters are introduced at an excellent pace. It quickly sets up their character, but then, as the story progresses, you realize there's more depth to them, and you get to watch them interact and change throughout the year. Even subtle future plot points are laid out that you won't even notice until your second read through. 4th favorite in the series, 10/10 for me, would recommend to anyone of any age. I couldn't find a way to work it into the book, but the reason Dumbledore flew instead of getting there quicker was because of Fudge. At the beginning of the book, Hagrid mentioned how Dumbledore got messages from the man all the time, and Dumbledore was more than tired of having to arrive and help the man, so he was dragging his feet, if you will, to go up there. They don't even meet Fudge until the second book, and they don't see his true colors until the fifth, and by that time, this really wouldn't have a reason to cross their mind. Found that interesting.